Chapter 601. The white mist surged toward the distance. Indistinctly, chaotic noises penetrated the mist and became clearer and clearer. The blood-stained blade was pulled out of his chest bit by bit. In the heart-wrenching pain, no words could describe Li Tianlan's inner feelings. He fell to the ground, and the blood spread on the ground. He looked at the master of Samsara Palace blankly, and no one knew what he was thinking. This strike was vicious and precise. The blade almost penetrated his heart. The sword energy destroyed the inside of his body. It was not fatal, but it caused Li Tianlan a very serious injury in an instant. Even with the help of the dragon vein, it would take at least half a month to recover from such an injury. It might not be a long time, but it also meant that the next battle had nothing to do with him. He lay quietly on the ground. Blood flowed out of his body, and his body began to become cold. Dongqing Rushi, who was one step faster than Qin Weibai, carefully held him in her arms. She raised her head and looked at the master of Samsara Palace. Her eyes, which used to be clear and blank, suddenly became as sharp as a knife. The ancient famous sword of Jade Pool, Silence, trembled violently on her back. The violent sword energy surged and gathered, and the white mist was vast and mighty. The strong killing intent completely locked on the master of Samsara Palace. The master of Samsara Palace was indifferent. She stood there quietly and looked at Li Tianlan's eyes. There was no emotion in Li Tianlan's eyes. They seemed to be looking at each other, but his pupils had no focus, only blankness. It was the most thorough numbness and silence. The cold wind blew far away with the surging white mist. Unparalleled luck and vitality began to gather toward Wang Tianzong. The eyes of the master of Samsara Palace also became numb and silent. Everything she loved, the whole world, was empty in an instant. It was blank. She didn't know how long she stood there. Her complicated thoughts seemed to stretch time infinitely. Thousands of years, the previous life, the present life, the entanglement of gratitude and hatred, love, hatred, hate, and madness. The boundless white snow and sword light seemed to have drifted over from another world, covering and completely enveloping her. She stood there as if she had lost her soul, leaving only an extremely cold and desperate body. "I'm sorry." She finally spoke again. She still had thousands of words and countless secrets that she hadn't shared with him. Sparkling tears fell and froze on the ground. She had so many things to say, but when the words reached her mouth, they became the most ordinary words. "Sorry." Li Tianlan looked at him quietly. The world in front of him darkened. The darkness gradually surged over. His eyelids became heavier and heavier, but he refused to close them. He only looked at him quietly. There was no hatred, no anger, no confusion. He just watched with a despairing calmness. "Why?" Dongqing Rushi's voice suddenly sounded. The master of Samsara Palace glanced at her, and then at Qin Weibai. There was an unconcealable envy and absent-mindedness in her eyes. She took a step back. "After tonight, take him back to Zhongzhou State." She stepped back gently, but her eyes were fixed on Li Tianlan. "From now on, take good care of him." Dongqing Rushi's eyes were still sharp. Instinctively, she stood up and reached out to tug at her sleeves. Dongqing Rushi turned her head and glanced at her. Qin Weibai shook her head at her. Her face was pale. Looking at the master of Samsara Palace who was quietly stepping back, her eyes were full of heartache. The master of Samsara Palace, who was dressed in black and looked a little bloated, gradually disappeared in the white mist. His voice sounded in the white mist. "Come out." Light footsteps stepped on the soft grass. A middle-aged man with meticulous clothes and appearance walked out of the white mist. A dazzling golden light spread out under his feet. His eyes were blank, but the golden light was extremely bright. The pale golden light seemed to cover the entire sky above the manor, completely enveloping every corner of the manor. "Jiang Qiansong." Dongqing Rushi's voice suddenly lowered. The golden light, and the man in front of her didn't hide at all. This was the 30-meter mortal world, known as the domain with the strongest defense in the dark world. What appeared in front of her was the former patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, who was wanted by Wulan State after being expelled from the Jiang family of South America, and had been missing for a while. Jiang Qiansong looked at Dongqing Rushi indifferently. His domain was still spreading, condensing, and protecting the entire manor. Qin Weibai skillfully applied medicine to Li Tianlan's bleeding. She carefully bandaged the hideous wound and said softly, "He is not an enemy now, and he won't be for the time being." Dongqing Rushi was in a daze. Jiang Qiansong in front of her was not only an enemy, but also the most competent bodyguard. He, who was known as the best in the world in defense, was almost the greatest protection of this manor. She suddenly felt a little pain. The subtle pain went deep into her mind little by little. She looked at Jiang Qiansong's eyes full of confusion and murmured to herself, "What's going on?" Li Tianlan looked at the direction in which the master of Samsara Palace left quietly. His will kept struggling. The boundless darkness swallowed him up. He closed his eyes and fell into a coma. Qin Weibai hesitated and whispered. The palace master suppressed Jiang Qiansong's will and created a new personality in his body. Dongqing Rushi was about to speak when a dazzling light suddenly spread out in the thick white mist. Countless white mist disappeared completely in an instant. The manor, which had been shrouded in white mist in the battle, reappeared in Mormons. The chaotic fighting and noise covered it in an instant. The figure of the master of Samsara Palace had gone far away. The colorful light enveloped her. Her figure began to rise into the air and gradually went up. The domain of the 30-meter mortal world kept shining. The figure of the master of Samsara Palace silently broke through the so-called strongest defense domain in the dark world, and disappeared in an instant. Qin Weibai raised her head, and her eyes were sad. From the day the Samsara Palace was established, there were countless plans, countless arrangements, countless sacrifices, countless transactions and compromises. They destroyed the night spirit, fought against Zhongzhou state, set off the final battle of Heaven Capital, and entered the chaos of Eastern Europe. The date of death, the trial day, the final day, everything had an end. The colorful light kept going up and blended into the night sky. Countless karma officially came to an end at this moment. No one could stop anything. The general trend rumbled and rolled forward. Boom. In the earth-shattering explosion, the blood-like scarlet light sounded as soon as the master of Samsara Palace disappeared, and the white mist disappeared. The noise of the war came from afar. The manor lost the protection of the white mist, and was directly surrounded the moment it reappeared in Mormons. No one could say for sure how long these people had been waiting, and no one knew how they found the location of this manor in the thick white fog. An incomparably ferocious attack came crashing over in an instant. Red light flashed, and someone was charging at the forefront with large strides. 6 people. Surrounding the domain of the 30-meter mortal world. The 6 people in the front rushed over at the fastest speed. Their clothes began to burn while they were running. Their clothes disappeared, and their flesh and blood were scorched in the sudden burning flame. Some reflective luster of metal flowed out. The pupils of the 6 people had completely turned blood red. The mighty energy burst out in an instant, and it was closely connected. It was almost an endless stream of red light. Dongqing Rushi held Li Tianlan gently, and her eyes were blank. Qin Weibai's heart suddenly sank. The clear red light and the mighty energy clearly proved the origin of the other party. The Wang family of Beihai. The Devil Troop. Behind the 6 devils were the most elite forces of the Beihai Corps, hundreds and thousands of them. The elite army kept a subtle distance from the devils, and charged at the same time. At this moment, Qin Weibai finally remembered the conversation with the master of Samsara Palace, when she was about to enter Mormons. In the countless simulations and deductions of the Samsara Palace, even if everything was perfect, their chips were always a little short. What the Samsara Palace wanted was not victory or defeat. There was no so-called winner in the chaos of Eastern Europe. What the Samsara Palace wanted was a new era in the wilderness, a new era in which Li Tianlan lived. They had Blue Sky Underworld, Shadow Ripper, and Falling Stars. They had Lin Fengting, Li Guangtu, and Jiang Qiansong. There was also a murderous weapon lurking in the city. The Devil Corps, the Xianyuan Sword Troop, the elites of the Wang family of Beihai, and the Lin clan. The 13th floor, the Invincible Sword, Flaming Fire. Countless bargaining chips were prepared in an unusually ample manner. But it was still not enough. Today's Sword Emperor was truly invincible in the world, and there was only one chance to deal with him. In countless deductions and expectations, the final outcome was always a little short of what the Samsara Palace wanted. It was not much, but it was a crucial point. That was Li Tianlan's life and death. If Li Tianlan really appeared in Mormons, protected by Jiang Qiansong's new personality, the strongest 30-meter mortal world was enough to block most of the dangers. But the Wang family of Beihai had the Devil Troop. Even if the self-explosion of the Devil Troop was not as powerful as the murderous weapon, it was not far behind. The answer given by the master of Samsara Palace was that one group of the Devil Troop sent by the Beihai Corps to Eastern Europe had been destroyed, and the other group had no capital to perish together because of excessive energy consumption. But no one knew how many people there were in the Devil Troop of the Wang family of Beihai. What if Wang Tianzong was crazy enough to throw himself into the third group of the Devil Troop? The master of Samsara Palace said that Jiang Qiansong could stop it. Qin Weibai never doubted it. Even at that time, she never doubted it. Her only doubt was who would stop the subsequent elites of the Wang family of Beihai after Jiang Qiansong stopped the third group of the Devil Troop. At that time, the master of Samsara Palace said that there was still a sword missing. A sword to make up for the difference. Qin Weibai did not know the specific meaning of this sentence at that time, nor did she understand which sword it was. But now all the expectations had become reality. In front of her was the third group of the Devil Troop. At least 1,000 core elites of the Wang family of Beihai were mighty. Everything was happening. There was really a sword in front of Qin Weibai. The sword trembled violently, and the cracked scabbard was constantly cracking. The famous sword of Jade Pool. Silence. The red light all over the sky spread over. The first demon, who was burning all over, opened his hands. The scarlet light seemed to flow out of every pore of his body. His body leaped into the air, and without any hesitation he directly hit the domain of the 30-meter mortal world. With the blood mist, his body exploded in an instant, and the violent energy was released to the extreme in an instant. The domain of the 30-meter mortal world began to flash. The second demon rushed into the domain, and a large roar began to sound. Then there was the third person. Jiang Qiansong's body trembled violently. The roaring explosion brought an extremely violent heat wave. A large mouthful of blood spurted from his mouth. He knelt on the ground, still trying to maintain his domain. The fourth person. The fifth person. The sixth person. The red light obliterated everything. The continuous explosions happened in an instant. The extremely solid 30-meter mortal world was completely broken in an instant. The golden light and the red light rushed into the sky at the same time. The Devil Troop disappeared. A large number of core elites of the Beihai Corps rushed into the manor. It was a vast expanse. Endless chaos broke out in the manor. Flowers and plants were trampled to pieces, and the ground was sinking. The small number of elites of the Samsara, and the Qin clan stationed in the manor, had almost no room to resist in front of the core power of the Wang family of Beihai. Blood flowed freely. In the continuous roars and screams, the whole world became trance and reality. The silent sword was no longer trembling. Dongqing Rushi held the hilt of the sword. She held Li Tianlan with one hand. Her black hair fell down and fell on his face. Dongqing Rushi stared at Li Tianlan's face and murmured softly, "Tianlan, I love you very much." Countless people surged in, and their murderous intent soared to the sky. They were the strongest elites of the Beihai Corps. They were also abandoned by the Wang family of Beihai. Everything that could prove their identity and position, including the Devil Troop, had been completely destroyed. At the most suitable time, the Wang family of Beihai was exchanging pawns. They used the Devil Troop and the core elites of the Beihai Corps to exchange for Li Tianlan. The cracked scabbard of the silent sword broke and fell to the ground little by little. With the sword intent of several invincible realm experts of Jade Pool, the sword shone brightly. Dongqing Rushi held the sword and raised her hand. There was no hesitation, no choice. Her eyes were no longer confused. She was a little reluctant, but she was extremely determined. The sharp sound of a long sword being unsheathed suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. In the next second, the extremely misty and dreamy sword light rose to the sky and tore heaven and earth apart. The sword light enveloped Qin Weibai, Dongqing Rushi, and Li Tianlan. In an instant, it devoured all the elites of the Beihai Corps. In the center of the city, everyone raised their heads and looked in the direction of the manor at the same time. Wang Tianzong took a deep look there and frowned. Li Guangtu, who was held in Wang Tianzong's hand, also felt the sword light and the sword intent. It seemed to be the most gorgeous color in the world, misty and dreamy, holy and ethereal. The unique skill of Jade Pool. The sword of heavenly flying fairy. That was also the sword that Dongqing Rushi once tried to draw the sword in heaven capital more than 3 years ago, but she was forced back by him. Jade Pool was silent and finally unsheathed in the end of the dark. Of course he knew whose sword it was. Li Guangtu's eyes turned red in an instant. His eyes were scarlet red, and there was only madness left in them. Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong. His hoarse roar shrouded the whole Mormons in an instant. The killing intent, which had reached the extreme, suddenly burst out along with the reckless sword light. The realm that was only one step away from the chosen one was shattered by him in an instant with great determination. The peak of the invincible realm. The invincible realm was stable. He had just entered the invincible realm. Half-step invincible realm. The peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Li Guangtu's realm retreated 1,000 miles, but the unprecedented sword energy covered the sky in an instant, and almost tore Wang Tianzong's sword light into pieces. Li Guangtu's scarlet eyes had lost all reason, only madness and ferocity. Wang Tianzong. The misty sword light dimmed and disappeared. In the extremely shrill scream, the 24 moves of sword and the 10th unique domain were completely integrated. There was no sword in Li Shi's hand, but in her hysterical resentment, she became the sharpest sword in the world. There was only sword light between heaven and earth. Li Guangtu was crazy. Li Shi was also crazy. When all the chips were thrown out, the two of them rushed to Wang Tianzong at the same time with their own lives as chips. Regardless of everything. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 602. The change was completely unexpected. The dreamy sword light in the distance rose and disappeared. When people were still guessing which invincible realm expert it was, Li Guangtu's furious and crazy roar had resounded over the whole Mormons. The indescribable rage swallowed all reason in an instant. Li Guangtu broke down. All the paranoia, pride, ambition, and obsession turned into wildfire in an instant. He let go of everything and no longer thought about the future or the outcome. Wang Tianzong in front of him was so clear. Every thought in his brain, every drop of blood, and even every cell was roaring in a complicated manner. Kill him! Kill him! The sword light shone in the furious roar. In an instant, Li Guangtu tried his best to break free from Wang Tianzong's restraint. Mormons, which was almost in ruins, was full of flashing sword light. The sword light filled the sky and the earth. In an instant, the whole Mormons almost became a forest full of sword energy. Flames appeared in every corner, burning the heaven and the earth. This sword carried all the martial arts of deity, moving forward with indomitable will. Wang Tianzong's figure began to retreat for the first time, and he was 1,000 meters away in an instant. Li Shi's sword light rushed over from behind him. At this moment, what Wang Tianzong felt was completely different, but extremely similar madness. Li Guangtu's sword intent burned between heaven and earth. The fire spread on the ground, and the sky was dyed orange. This was his most thorough outbreak. For the first time in his life, the 24 moves of sword and the 6 paths of reincarnation sword appeared on him at the same time. The 2 unique skills of Sword Tao, which were known as the strongest in the dark world, had 2 completely different ways of exerting force. The sword light continued to spread and went straight forward. The extremely condensed domain behind him began to expand in the sword intent. That was the extreme expansion of the 10th unique domain. The 10th unique domain, which was known as the strongest domain in the dark world, spread over under the pressure of the 24 moves of sword. Li Guangtu, Li Shi. They were both 2 different unique skills. The completely different powers were tearing their bodies every minute and second. Their injuries were getting worse and worse, and their vitality was flowing away crazily. A pincer attack. Wang Tianzong had no way to retreat. His body instantly went up. In the calm silence, his eyes were full of gloom. The countless probing and guesses he had made in the past found the answer that could not be more obvious from this sword. Wang Tianzong smiled. Is your heart aching? His voice converged into a line and directly passed into Li Guangtu's ears. It was incomparably cold. When she came back from the border, my heartache was 10 times more intense than yours. Huawu is dead, and your last hope is gone. Are you in despair? You should understand how I felt back then. I should let you experience it slowly. His body was still moving upward. Li Shi and Li Guangtu were also going up. The two figures were getting closer and closer. Wang Tianzong was calm. This sword was very strong, really very strong. Li Guangtu's determination to die, the combination of the 6 paths of reincarnation, and the 24 moves of sword was even slightly stronger than Li Guangtu's tribulation when he was desperate. This state was very close to Wang Tianzong's state before the tribulation. Plus Li Shi. If the two of them combined their swords, perhaps there would really be a sword that could reach the state of the chosen one. However, how could an imperfect prodigy be considered supreme? Wang Tianzong was not afraid of this sword, but when he saw the two people below fighting desperately, and the different forces tearing their flesh and blood with great pain every minute and second, Wang Tianzong suddenly felt extremely happy. He thought of the summer solstice. All the worries and fears of so many years seemed to have found a vent at this moment. Wang Tianzong's eyes became a little crazy. The two sword lights at the bottom, which were angry from different directions, finally gathered together. In an instant, the 6 paths of reincarnation and the 10th unique domain began to crazily squeeze each other. They repelled each other. Li Guangtu's face was covered with wrinkles in an instant. The white dress fluttered in the air. Li Shi's black hair was turning snow white at a speed visible to the naked eye, becoming pale, and eventually losing its luster. But the 24 moves of sword that were determined to die merged perfectly in the mutual repulsion of the 6 paths of reincarnation and the 10th unique domain. Boom! There was a sudden violent sound between heaven and earth. The loud sound swept through the whole city. In everyone's sight, the 2 sword lights burning the sky were completely integrated, and the infinite sword energy turned into a ray of light shooting straight into the sky. Crack! Wang Tianzong's palm moved. A crisp sound swept through the sky. It seemed like a long sword was unsheathed, and also like a bone vibration. The sword light that was condensed to the extreme illuminated the night sky very clearly. In the absolutely pure light, everyone saw a touch of black. That touch of black expanded in the blink of an eye and squeezed into the pure light with incomparable strength. Everyone in the city saw this scene. It was a black sword. The sun, moon, stars, mountains, lakes, and seas were carved on both sides of the sword edge. With unparalleled majesty, the 100-meter-long giant sword seemed to be a black phantom. The incomparably heavy blade vibrated in the light. The sun, stars, mountains, lakes, and seas on both sides of the sword edge seemed to move at the same time. The 100-meter-long giant sword phantom directly tore the incomparably pure sword light and pressed down with supreme majesty. The empty space suddenly seemed to be real like water ripples. The ripples continued to spread under the suppression of the black sword and filled the sky. With blood all over their bodies, the figures of Li Shi and Li Guangtu fell softly. Some elites of the Samsara Palace rushed over to catch their bodies and quickly retreated. But as soon as they moved, the invisible sword intent had completely torn their bodies, and blood burst out. Wang Tianzong's figure seemed to come to the ground from the sky with one step. His breath was steady and still at the peak, and even his clothes were still clean and tidy. The black giant sword was carried behind him, as if it had never moved. Li Shi and Li Guangtu fell to the ground, completely unconscious. Wang Tianzong glanced at them and said faintly, "Their lives are mine. Who wants to take them away?" The scene became completely silent. Wang Tianzong glanced around. Within sight, people had knelt down constantly. The first was the Beihai Corps. Then a few surviving small forces in the dark world knelt on the ground. Then a small number of elites of the Samsara Palace also knelt on the ground. The Lin clan. The Purgatory of Heaven capital. The Polar Ground Alliance. More and more people knelt down. His Majesty's invincible voice turned into a sound wave and continued to spread at the end of this era. No one had a fluke anymore. No one could stop Wang Tianzong anymore. Lin Fengting, Li Guangtu, Li Shi, 3 murderous weapons. They used all means to break out. They didn't even cause any injury to Wang Tianzong. Supreme and supreme. In the countless voices of submission, Wang Tianzong's eyes kept turning. There were still people who didn't kneel. The old people who belonged to the Li family in the purgatory of heaven capital. The real elites of the Lin clan. The real henchmen of the Samsara palace. Everyone was glaring at him. He looked at Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting, who was covered in blood, stood up shakily. Wang Tianzong looked at him quietly, and was silent for a long time. "Come back to Beihai with me," he suddenly said. "Just like when we were young, stay in Beihai with peace of mind. We are still brothers." "Brothers?" Lin Fengting laughed. "Do you want me to give up martial arts?" "Yes." Wang Tianzong's voice was calm. "You have martial arts. I will be uneasy if you live in Beihai. I have no brothers." Lin Fengting looked at Wang Tianzong and whispered, "From the moment you came to Mormons, I had no brothers." Yu Sheng was imprisoned in Beihai and watched Beihai swallow up the Lin clan. This was definitely not the result that Lin Fengting wanted to see. "You're still not reconciled," Wang Tianzong said quietly. "Of course I'm not reconciled." Lin Fengting was still smiling. He was covered in blood, but his smile was extremely free and easy. "This is the price that the loser should bear. In fact, you thought too much from the beginning. Even if I broke through, I might not go to the Lin clan." "Tianzong, do you believe what you said?" Lin Fengting countered with a question. "Is there really absolute freedom in the supreme rule? The freedom that belongs to the Lin clan?" Wang Tianzong looked at him, and was silent for a long time. "The loser should pay the price." Lin Fengting took a step back. "But I haven't lost yet." He pulled out a soft sword from his waist. The soft sword edge was instantly straightened. Lin Fengting's voice continued to ring. "Before you came, I talked about you with the master of Samsara Palace. She said that there are only 3 men she likes in this life, and you are one of them. So you deserve her last resort." Lin Fengting's body began to glow. An extremely bright and dazzling light condensed on Lin Fengting's sword edge, and went straight into the sky in an instant. The whole city began to shake without warning. Wang Tianzong suddenly raised his head. One after another, sword light rose in all corners of the city, in all directions. Plus Lin Fengting. 13 sword lights. They were extremely dazzling and weak. The sword energy, which was almost of the same origin, quickly entwined and rushed to the highest point of the night. Mormons shook more and more violently. Sword formation of the 13-story buildings. Lin Fengting's voice floated. "If you die today, I swear by the ancestors of the Lin clan that the Lin clan will do its best to protect the Wang family of Beihai in the future." Wang Tianzong looked calm, and did not speak. His sight went into the night sky. In the extremely quiet world, an unprecedented aura was turbulent in the highest point. Someone seemed to be rising. He was about to fall. Rising. Everything under her feet began to shrink gradually. In the thin air, her thoughts became absent-minded. She had forgotten who she was. The close-fitting armor that made her body look extremely bloated made a cracking sound under the tremendous pressure. Countless sword intents were constantly brewing in the sky. Chaotic memories flooded his mind like a tidal wave. "I'm Li Tianlan. They all deserve to die. From today on, I allow you to call me Empress." The Pope agreed. "I want flowers to be spread all the way from the Holy Land to Zhongzhou State. Whatever my sword wants, I'll have it. Where's my Empress? Why, I'm sorry. You'll die, and so will he. I really want." Her mind fell from the highest point into the abyss, falling all the way without an end. Her tears had already dried up. Endless numbness and silence occupied all her consciousness. "Do you think I'm a bird? I have wings. My parents are dead. It's all your fault. I want to fly down and show you." The chaotic and absent-minded will began to concentrate unprecedentedly, climbing toward a vague boundary. "Please, sir." From today on, he is the holy disciple of the Lin clan. "Child, welcome home. The Wang family of Beihai will fall. This era will be buried with it." She reached out and touched the hilt of the sword in the nothingness behind her. "I really want to take another look at him." In the supreme void, her rising figure finally stopped. The colorful light lit up. An incomparably perfect sword intent reflected the starlight and condensed in her hand. I really want to take another look at him. Clang! The sound of the long sword being unsheathed suddenly resounded through the sky and the earth. The wind was rising and the clouds were surging. The extremely clear sound, like thunder, continued to spread from the sky. The colorful light bloomed in her hand. I really want to take another look at him. The long sword that had been sealed for more than 20 years was pulled out from her back little by little. It was pulled out from the nothingness. Take another look at him. I'm sorry. The rainbow-colored light dimmed from its incomparably dazzling brilliance and became silent. The giant sword was held in the hand of the master of Samsara Palace from the nothingness. The sword intent in the sky was rioting. This famous sword that had been sealed for countless years showed its power for the first time in a long time. The blade was spinning in her hand. The black giant sword. It was broad, heavy, and majestic. The sun, moon, stars, mountains, lakes, and seas were carved on both sides of the blade. The sword intent was hazy. It was so perfect, so proud, so noble. The sun, moon, and stars were shining on the blade. The mountains, lakes, and seas were flowing on the blade. This sword was the world. In the sky, the master of Samsara Palace lowered her head and looked at the sword. On the ground, the body of the coldness of 9 states began to shake inexplicably. The master of Samsara Palace held the giant sword and aimed it at the sword emperor on the ground. Her voice echoed from a high place, clear and pleasant, like thunder. This sword is called Xianyuan Blade. This chapter is about the title. In fact, this volume is about this sword. I said before that this volume would have the strongest sword in the book. I think I said it last year. Chapter 603. Only by looking at the world from a high vantage point would the world reveal its true nature. The mountains were shrinking, the rivers were shrinking, and the mountains, the rivers, the sun, the moon, and the stars were all silent. The world was silent. There was no clamor, no thunder, not even a thought. The heavens and the earth encompassed the entire world. Everywhere the eye could see was frozen, and it was like a painting silently waiting for someone to shatter it. Therefore, the world was extremely fragile. She stood in the air, looking at the Xianyuan blade in her hand. The pitch-black body of the sword became dark and shiny, and the sun, moon, and stars engraved on the blade seemed to have completely flown out. The almost solidified sword intent continued to grow. The 7-colored light flickered faintly. The pitch-black blade trembled slightly. A truly invincible momentum fell directly into Mormon's from afar, mighty and mighty. Wang Tianzong's voice sounded from below, cold, indifferent, and fearless. They are all external objects. Then the master of Samsara Palace remembered that Wang Tianzong had seen this sword before. At the funeral held by Zhongzhou State for the victims of the Snowdance Corps in Reki City, the appearance of this sword was equivalent to telling Wang Tianzong that she had not died. Therefore, Wang Tianzong should have been prepared for this sword. Countless scenes kept echoing in his mind. Since I entered the invincible realm, I haven't used any so-called conspiracy. I've been sneaky and secretive. I look mysterious and unfathomable. Is it useful? My sword is enough to fight against the entire world. No one can fight against the entire world. That's because you aren't strong enough. Fake death? Such good acting skills. The master of Samsara Palace laughed. Under the mask, her eyes were completely silent, and even her smile was gloomy. Yes, Wang Tianzong was prepared. But the master of Samsara Palace didn't care at all. She pushed for the decisive battle of Heaven Capital, the 3-year fighting in the Dark World, the chaos in Eastern Europe, and the entire Dark World to the abyss. She didn't care about anything. Truly powerful people didn't need to care about such things. She might not be strong enough, but this sword was strong enough. Under the strongest sword light, any kind of defense would be meaningless. She looked up at the sky. The clouds floating in the sky were almost within reach. Starlight sprinkled down, reflecting the misty light. It was so clear, but the lights below seemed far away, hazy and almost illusory. The world was turning upside down. Day and night alternated. The finish line was right in front of him. She did not respond to Wang Tianzong's words, and she did not need to. As Xianyuan Feng shook violently, she lifted her foot and took a step forward. The instant his foot landed on the ground was extremely short, yet infinitely long. One sword intent after another flew into the sky. The sword intent was fixed in all directions, blocking the entire Mormons. The master of Samsara Palace's body tightened. Boundless power and sword chi burst out from her body in an instant, like the roar of a mountain or a tsunami. Countless images flashed through her mind. The sword intent continued to rise, surpassing one peak after another. The will that was condensed to the extreme broke through the incomparably firm boundary and entered a new world. The flying snow in the depths of his heart rolled up, and along with the strong wind, the surrounding mountains began to crumble. The Yangtze River, the Yellow River, the vast ocean, the whole world was in turmoil. The 15th blade. Samsara. She lifted her head and finally saw him again. Heavy rain and strong winds. Amidst the endless storm, he stood in front of her with a smile. Look at me. I will sweep this world clean for you. Intense pain spread throughout his body. The sword chi was surging, shattering the void, and the wind and clouds were turbulent. They are all. His bones began to shatter. His feet, his legs, his abdomen, his ribs, his cervical spine. Every piece of bone, every piece of muscle completely collapsed in the condensation of the sword intent. The blood flowed through his body without any hindrance. It was warm and comfortable. The wind surged over. With a clear cracking sound, the silver mask began to shatter. Cracks gradually appeared on her lifelike face. Half of the mask covering her true face shattered in the air, revealing half of her delicate and sharp face. Her body was constantly shaking. Her bones and muscles collapsed completely. The sword intent surged over and surrounded her. That bloated body was deformed in the air. Bang! With the sound of metal shattering, countless pieces of heavy armor fell apart. Her figure became extremely slender and enchanting, but she had no weight. Only that hand was still holding the Xianyuan blade tightly. The sword energy continued to rise, shattering the world and filling everything. Blood gushed out of her body. The world was like the autumn wind. Life was like falling leaves. If I let go, the bones of her fingers began to shatter. Blood flowed down from every part of her body. Everything was fine. The master of Samsara Palace opened her eyes. In the boundless void, a butterfly appeared in her line of sight, dancing gracefully. She laughed softly. The subtle sound of flapping wings rang in everyone's ears. The sound of flying was everywhere in the sky and on the ground. It was subtle and clear. Wang Tianzong looked around the whole city. In an instant, Lin Fengting, who had almost lost all his sword energy, fell to the ground. The dazzling sword light guided all the sword energy around him. Flaming fire danced at the end of the city. The sharp sword energy kept flying. The sword, which gathered all her martial arts cultivation, rushed up layer by layer. One after another, the half-step invincible realm experts began to burn themselves. Countless sword energy rushed into the sky and were closely connected, blocking the whole city and guiding the direction of the supreme sword. Butterflies appeared in front of Wang Tianzong. Butterflies appeared in front of everyone. The butterflies all over the city were flying in every corner of the city. They were free, happy, and melancholy, as if there were all kinds of states in the world. Everyone seemed to be lost in these butterflies, lost in thought. Wang Tianzong was still calm. The sword in the air was getting clearer and clearer. The absolute sword intent drove the absolute will. At this moment, after the Pope and Angel, the dark world finally had a third transcendent realm expert in the spiritual field. The butterflies fluttered their wings and flew high. In an instant, Wang Tianzong suddenly came to his senses. The butterflies all over the city suddenly disappeared. In the Beihai core, a large number of elites subconsciously stretched out their hands as if they wanted to catch something. Their eyes suddenly moved, and blood instantly spurted out of their mouths. Countless people fell down with the disappearance of the butterflies. Death was spreading wildly. The crazy and hoarse roar, like that of a wild beast, rang out. More than a dozen figures with their bodies burning with flames rushed toward Wang Tianzong desperately. The elites of Samsara Palace began to drag Lin Fengting away. Li Guangtu and Li Shi were also dragged away by the elites of Samsara Palace. Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows for a moment. When he was about to make a move, An extremely violent voice suddenly rang out. Go to hell. On the tall building in the distance, a burly figure like a giant raised the muzzle. The leader of the Polar Ground Alliance. Tyrant. Tyrant recovered his strength with the drugs of the Wang family of Beihai. Tyrant held the murderous weapon lent to him by the Wang family of Beihai. The elegant and soothing indefinite grace suddenly glowed. In the brilliant light, a ray of light that shone more than half of the city appeared in front of Wang Tianzong in an instant. It arrived in an instant. This blow had almost no process of flight, and the huge destructive power had directly covered Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong opened his hands, and the violent sword intent surged in an instant. The light of indefinite grace was forcibly imprisoned in the violent sword intent. The killing intent flashed in Wang Tianzong's eyes. He suddenly waved his hand, gathering the destructive power of indefinite grace in an instant, and rushed straight to Tyrant. In the roar of destruction, he still wanted to chase, but more than a dozen figures burning with flames had rushed over. The earth-shattering explosion swept across, and smoke was rising. No one knew their names. From the beginning of their appearance, they were destined to be consumables that would disappear with the Samsara Palace. Their transformation technology was far worse than that of the Devil Troop. But if they didn't consider the endurance and only pursued the destructive power, their power was no worse than anyone. This was the Devil Troop. The Devil Troop of the Samsara Palace. All the devils began to gather, and then exploded at the same time. The two extreme poisons merged together and turned into turbulent smoke. The perfect combination of coldness and heat. The coldest poison. The hottest poison. Even if Wang Tianzong was fearless, he didn't want to face these at this time. He frowned and took a step back subconsciously. All the patience in his eyes disappeared completely. The killing intent filled his eyes. His figure went higher and higher into the sky. Looking at Lin Fengting and Li Guangtu, who were getting farther and farther away, his fingers moved slightly. The world suddenly quieted down. In an instant, Wang Tianzong suddenly raised his head. His face became unprecedentedly serious. Above the sky, countless wind and thunder broke out, and blood was flying. The master of Samsara Palace, whose body had completely collapsed, managed to open her eyes. There was no starlight in front of her. Her consciousness began to be swallowed by the darkness. In the boundless darkness, she thought of what he had said in the snow-filled sky. It was the sentence she remembered the most clearly. She closed her eyes and said softly, "The world was like the autumn wind. Life was like falling leaves." This was the last voice that the master of Samsara Palace left to the world. It was clear, stable, majestic, and proud. You, nonentities. High in the sky, she let go of her hand. Buzz. In the buzzing sound that filled everything, Xianyuan Feng flew out. In an instant, the whole sky of Mormons was surging. The sword light that filled the world was burning under the night sky, like thousands of stars burning and falling. Meteors appeared under the night sky. Thousands of meteors. Thousands of swords. In Wang Tianzong's sight, the whole world was completely compressed into a sword light in an instant. All the meteors were residual shadows. There was only one sword between heaven and earth. All in one sword. The sword light that flew over from the sky tore the sky for tens of thousands of meters, and the whole city. With indescribable sharpness, it almost reached Wang Tianzong's time limit in the blink of an eye. This was the real end of Kendo. Perfect, flawless, and extremely brilliant. In the peak of glory, no one saw someone falling from the sky, and no one would care. Wang Tianzong's eyes narrowed. He saw the true face of Xianyuan Feng. Xianyuan Feng's appearance, momentum, size, and even sword intent were exactly the same as the coldness of 9 states. The meteors cut through the sky. The sky fell and the earth cracked. The ancient costume on Wang Tianzong's body fluttered coldly. In the clear and crisp sound, in everyone's sight, the coldness of 9 states was unsheathed in an instant. Xianyuan Feng shone. It was colorful. There was colorful light everywhere between heaven and earth. There was only black and white on the coldness of 9 states. Between the day and night, the sharp edge was thrown out. The whole city began to shake crazily. The supreme sword intent swept across the whole wilderness in an instant. Collapsed skyscrapers, messy ground, flying dust, solidified blood, and verdant grass. Huge waves in the sea. Everything in the world rose up at the same time as Wang Tianzong's sword was unsheathed. The black and white light spread out and covered the colorful sword light outside the sky. Countless ruins combined into a mad dragon and went straight to the sky 10,000 meters high in the blink of an eye. Xian Yuanfeng fell straight down. Amidst the loud explosions, dazzling rays of light shot everywhere. Without any pause, Xian Yuanfeng, burning with colorful light, fell straight down, penetrated countless rising boulders, smashed a large number of ice flowers, and broke the waves. The world was extremely fragile. All matter was shattered by this sword strike. You were all nonentities. There seemed to be endless black and white light flowing around Wang Tianzong. The colorful light shone down. Everything was real, and everything was illusory. The rapidly flowing black and white sword energy flew away. Day and night alternated. Wang Tianzong stood in the sky, and the light in an instant was like the sun. The black and white sword light smashed the colorful sword light in an instant. Xian Yuanfeng smashed the night and the strong light, still moving forward. All in one sword. Sword energy, sword light, sword intent. They were all illusory. A sword was a sword. The heavy sword light smashed the black and white sword intent. The whole city continued to collapse under the suppression of the two kinds of sword energy. Countless tall buildings were completely razed to the ground. The sword light, which had no way to retreat, rushed over directly, condensed the epitome of an era, and kept moving forward. Time seemed to freeze completely. Forever and ever. Wang Tianzong stood in the sky and was still shining. In the clear light and shadow, Xian Yuanfeng, who seemed to tear the sky from the ninth heaven, moved forward all the way, smashing the black and white sword intent and the endless light. There was no hesitation or confrontation. From beginning to end, there was only forward. It was invincible and nothing could not be broken. Bang! In the clear cracking sound, half of the sword edge of coldness of 9 states was smashed and shot out. Xian Yuanfeng's sword edge cut off the coldness of 9 states without any hesitation, and directly penetrated Wang Tianzong's chest. Blood spilled. It was like a dream. Samsara in a moment. The shooting star disappeared. The scorching sun in the sky dimmed completely. There was silence between heaven and earth. Everything ended abruptly after an instant of extreme brilliance. That truly perfect and invincible sword strike was simply too fast. It was so fast that no one could react in time. No one even knew what had happened in that instant. The shooting star cut through the sky and disappeared in a flash. The few survivors raised their heads and looked at the sky. The scorching sun in the sky dimmed and gradually disappeared. Wang Tianzong, dressed in an ancient costume, fell from the sky. A large amount of blood stained the lapel on his chest, and the gold rims on his clothes were stained with blood. His body landed steadily on the ground. Countless white mists still flew over from afar and merged into his body. His face was slightly pale, but he was still calm and indifferent. His aura seemed to have returned to the peak again. In the silence, he held the broken half of coldness of 9 states, raised his head, and looked in the direction where Xian Yuanfeng flew over. That place had already turned into nothingness. Under the clouds, there was only a hazy starlight. Wang Tianzong looked at it quietly and was silent for a long time. Chapter 604. The smoke and dust over the city slowly dissipated. The cold starlight shone on the city that was already in ruins. The corpses were cold, and the blood had completely solidified. In the formless and stiff scene, all the sword light and killing intent were dimming. In countless corners, all the survivors were silent, and even a little dull. The black and white and the meteor-like colorful sword light had completely disappeared. But the supreme sword intent seemed to be imprinted between heaven and earth, and in the depths of everyone's heart. No words could describe that sword strike. The sword light lit up in the sky tens of thousands of meters away, with thousands of residual shadows. It burned the night sky, tore heaven and earth, stirred up a raging tide, and penetrated the city. That sword strike was gorgeous, sharp, crazy, and determined. The real power was indescribable. When the sword light shattered all the obstacles, cut through the black and white, cut off the coldness of 9 states, and even penetrated Wang Tianzong without any hindrance. There were only the most ordinary words left in everyone's heart. It was thrilling. That was the most thrilling sword strike in the dark world for hundreds of years. The starry sky and the scorching sun, reality and illusion alternated. An eternal sword strike. It was like the declaration in the air at the moment when the long sword lit up. You are all non-entities. A major general of the Beihai Corps stared at the sky in a daze. The black and white and colorful sword light had long disappeared, but countless lights and shadows were still flashing in his pupils. He muttered to himself, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and fell straight to the ground. In the purgatory of Heaven Capital, a veteran of the Li family shook his head desperately. In severe pain, he seemed to want to reach out and cover his head. But as soon as he stretched out his hand, his whole body had become completely stiff. In the Samsara Palace, a core expert whose status was not inferior to that of a supermaster fell to the ground. Blood flowed from his mouth. He tried to open his mouth and reached out to grab something. Tens of thousands of meters away, the Sword Emperor and the Master of Samsara Palace exchanged a sword strike. The nearly eternal sword light was still flashing and replaying. No one knew whether it was a long time or a short time. Countless survivors' wills were completely shattered by that sword light. Some people's foundation was completely destroyed, and some people lost their vitality. That was supposed to be a supreme power, but on this night, there was a confrontation between the two. The two sword lights, one above and one below, almost destroyed the will of all the experts. When the sword lights fell, it was unknown how many experts' foundations were severely damaged. Wang Tianzong stood where he was. He rose up in a straight line and fell down in a straight line. That soul-stirring sword seemed to have left no trace on him other than some blood. He looked in the direction of the sword light for an unknown amount of time, before he slowly withdrew his gaze. Powerful life force gathered in his body, and the huge life force combined with the last white mist in the air, continuously repairing his body. His aura was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in the blink of an eye, he seemed to have returned to his peak. It was not until this moment that the crowd in a trance was sure that when the sword light rushed over and penetrated Wang Tianzong's chest at the last moment, it was not an illusion. Wang Tianzong did not block the sword. In the end, he still used the immortality potion. That meant Wang Tianzong's life. This might be exciting news. But now the sword light had completely disappeared, and Wang Tianzong was still standing there. All the excitement instantly turned into despair. Wang Tianzong sighed softly. His slight voice seemed to spread throughout the city and fell in everyone's ears. The people who were still in a trance suddenly woke up. The sword light disappeared completely. The world was silent. Wang Tianzong stood there with a strong aura, invincible in the world. The body of the coldness of 9 states had been smashed, but the last picture was still the picture of Wang Tianzong looking down at Mormons. The general trend surged over Mormons and began to dissipate. In the desolation and confusion, the chaos in Eastern Europe came to an end. Everything came to an end at the moment when the two sword lights met. Whether they liked it or not, the end was like this. So more and more people struggled to stand up. They knelt down in the direction of Wang Tianzong, prostrating themselves to show their submission. The loser should pay the price of dignity and more. Wang Tianzong did not speak. He looked into the distance, through the chaotic crowd and ruins. In silence, the elites of Samsara Palace had dragged the most important figures away from the battlefield. Lin Fengting, who was in a coma. Li Guangtu, who was seriously injured and dying. Li Shi, they had gradually gone far away, but this distance was not far for Wang Tianzong. 1 step, or 2 steps, but Wang Tianzong did not move. He quietly watched them get farther and farther away. From beginning to end he did not move. In the countless voices of submission and worship, he trampled all of Eastern Europe, and even the entire dark world under his feet. He thought of the sword light that had disappeared but seemed to exist eternally. He had never thought of that kind of kendo, nor did he expect that Samsara Palace would have such a sword. The 13-story building, which used the whole city as a sword formation, completely broke out the moment Xianyuan Feng entered the sky above the city. The sword formation was ignited in an instant. Until that moment, the power of that sword was really at its peak. That sword contained everything of the master of Samsara Palace. It was the sword intent that Xian Yuanfeng had accumulated for many years. It was the complete cooperation of the 13-story building under the guidance of flaming fire. It was also Lin Fengting's peak all-out attack. This was the trump card of Samsara Palace, which was unprecedentedly powerful. The voice of worship and submission was like a tsunami. Wang Tianzong was a little melancholic. August 24th was about to pass. Samsara Palace was completely destroyed on this day. The master of Samsara Palace lost the last group of elites on the battlefield, but she also got the result she wanted. Wang Tianzong knew that he could not stop all this after all. He defeated the master of Samsara Palace. But he did not defeat that sword light. No victory, no defeat. Perhaps from the very beginning, this chaos was destined to have no victor. Wang Tianzong raised his head and looked in another direction. Among the countless prostrating figures, an extremely tall figure stood there. Wang Tianzong looked at him. The other party was also looking at him. That was Tyrant. Tyrant with indefinite grace in his hand. The other party stood there quietly, looking at Sword Emperor who suppressed the entire dark world. His eyes were a little playful, a little indifferent, and a little cruel. The fact is obvious. Wang Tianzong said slowly. You are on the wrong team. Hypnosis is not that magical. Tyrant said indifferently. Especially when you are not in the transcendent realm. It is even more difficult to hypnotize an expert who is close to the peak of the invincible realm. And it is even more impossible to turn an invincible realm expert into a puppet. Samsara Palace hypnotized me, but at the critical moment, it could only influence my decision to a certain extent. In other words, their hypnosis could make me make the most correct choice at a more rational time. Wang Tianzong said yes. His eyes were unfathomable. Is this the right choice? Of course. Tyrant smiled and strode over. For now, it seems that this result is not bad. Ah, Wang Tianzong also laughed. Don't look at me like that. Tyrant's eyes were a little crazy. You can't threaten me. I was tempted to cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai, but when you are strong enough to sweep the dark world, there is no place for the Polar Ground Alliance. If I don't do anything tonight, I will definitely be a dog at the feet of the Wang family of Beihai in the future. I have enough of such a life. I can shoot you now. I've ruined your plan. I have to say that this murderous weapon is very useful. So it's mine. After tonight, Snow Country is also mine. Maybe the Wang family of Beihai will also be mine. Wang Tianzong didn't move. He just looked at Tyrant with some pity in his eyes. Why? Because I still have the power to fight. Tyrant laughed wildly. What about you? You look strong and at the peak, but in fact, you are just bluffing. So what if you are the heavenly son? In the face of that sword, I don't believe that you still have the ability to kill me. If you really have this ability, over there. He pointed to the direction of Li Guangtu's retreat and the manor in that direction. Li Tianlan was in the manor. They are all there. If you still have the power to fight, why don't you go and kill them? You may want to, but you can't. He was getting closer and closer to Wang Tianzong. The remaining army of the Wang family of Beihai gathered and rushed over. Tyrant sneered. Sword Emperor? Go to hell. He raised his hand and slapped Wang Tianzong's face hard. He liked this action and the feeling of smashing the famous sword light with one slap. The condensed domain was released in his hand. Tyrant laughed and waved his arm hard. There was no crisp sound. Patter. Something seemed to fall to the ground. The sharp pain came to the brain after a short stagnation. Blood spurted out. Tyrant opened his eyes wide. His eyes were bloodshot and extremely ferocious. The moment his arm was about to touch Wang Tianzong, he seemed to enter another world. That world was vast and deep, and the sword light was surging. He had no room to struggle at all. The sword light swept over and directly cut his arm. How is it possible? Tyrant's ferocious roar sounded. I told you. Wang Tianzong took a step forward. You are on the wrong team. The sword energy did not light up, but there was a slight friction sound in the air. Wang Tianzong walked past Tyrant and reached out to take the indefinite grace in his hand. The broken coldness of 9 states and the indefinite grace shrank in his hand at the same time. He stepped forward. tyrant behind him had completely stiffened. An icy wind blew over the silent city. The icy wind swept over. Tyrant's body shattered in an instant and turned into ashes, swirling in the air. The chaos in Eastern Europe began with the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance. It also ended with the complete destruction of the Polar Ground Alliance. Countless masters knelt on the ground, shivering, and no longer dared to resist. Wang Tianzong did not look at them. He walked slowly in the city, but he crossed a distance of hundreds of meters with one step. His figure was getting farther and farther away, and disappeared in an instant. The white mist in the manor completely dissipated. A large number of corpses almost covered the manor. After treating the wounds of Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi, a small number of elites of Samsara Palace carried their bodies into the villa of the manor. Li Guangtu, Lin Fengting, and Li Shi were still being carried to the manor. Qin Weibai sat on the grass, looked up at the starry sky, and was lost in thought. In the light footsteps, Wang Tianzong's figure walked directly into the manor. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 605. Under the night sky, the manor was completely clear. Without the dense fog, the hazy starlight sprinkled down, and the inside and outside of the manor seemed extremely clear. When Wang Tianzong walked into the manor, the last wisp of white fog in the corner had turned into a silk thread, slowly swimming in the direction of Li Tianlan. As he approached, the white thread obviously paused, and then continued to float toward Li Tianlan. Wang Tianzong's pupils contracted slightly for a moment, but he did nothing. Qin Weibai had already stood up. She calmly looked into Wang Tianzong's eyes, and her eyebrows were full of coldness. The Samsara Palace was destroyed, but the goddess was still the goddess. She stood there, and there was still a kind of coldness and arrogance that no one dared to blaspheme. But Wang Tianzong clearly saw a touch of blankness deep in Qin Weibai's eyes. There was only blankness. The master of Samsara Palace who forced that sword move was doomed. More than half of the 12 super masters of the Samsara Palace were dead or injured. Even Flaming Fire's life and death were uncertain. Countless core masters, core strength, and a large number of trump cards of the Samsara Palace were revealed. The master of Samsara Palace might have succeeded. Tomorrow might be a new era. But everything of the Samsara Palace would be buried at the end of the old era, and completely destroyed with her success. Under such circumstances, Qin Weibai only showed blankness. Wang Tianzong didn't even see the slightest anger and hatred in her eyes. Her blankness was not even because of the destruction of the Samsara Palace. Wang Tianzong felt that Qin Weibai was completely at a loss because of some concerns, or the blankness after the shadow suddenly disappeared. Wang Tianzong suddenly felt that she was a little strange. She narrowed her eyes and said calmly, "Who are you?" "Me." Qin Weibai was obviously stunned for a moment. She thought of the sword light just now and the master of Samsara Palace. She suddenly became a little angry, and her voice became sharp. "Why do you question my identity?" "I didn't question anything," Wang Tianzong said blandly. "It's just that you seem to have lost yourself." "I am me," Qin Weibai said coldly. "Do you need me to introduce myself?" Wang Tianzong smiled and shook his head. Tonight, he stood at the unprecedented peak of the dark world. It seemed that even his character had become calm and gentle. He withdrew all his killing intent and walked past Qin Weibai to the villa, where Li Tianlan was recuperating. Qin Weibai followed him quietly without saying a word. Li Tianlan was still unconscious. His military uniform had been taken off, and his upper body was naked. The huge wound on his chest had stopped bleeding, and the elites of Samsara Palace were carefully cleaning the wound for him. Dongqing Rushi lay beside him, leaning close to Li Tianlan. She seemed to have fallen asleep. Wang Tianzong watched quietly. He suddenly reached out and touched Li Tianlan's wound, feeling the sword intent in it. The movement of the sword appeared clearly in his mind, and the wound appeared clearly in front of him. He looked at it for a long while and muttered to himself, "This move is really gentle." Qin Weibai looked at Wang Tianzong expressionlessly. She did not stop him from coming in, nor did she stop him from touching Li Tianlan. From beginning to end, she was indifferent. Wang Tianzong finally turned around, looked at Qin Weibai and asked, Aren't you afraid that I'll kill him? Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes. She had been a little confused, but suddenly there was an indescribable coldness in her. This was a feeling that Wang Tianzong was very familiar with. He didn't meet Qin Weibai much, but almost every time, he felt this coldness from Qin Weibai. Wang Tianzong shook his hand. The sword energy was flowing in his palm, which was extremely delicate. Do you dare? Qin Weibai suddenly asked. The sword energy in his palm suddenly stagnated. Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows. I don't dare. Do you dare? Qin Weibai asked in an indifferent tone. Wang Tianzong fell silent. Qin Weibai stopped talking. In any case, Li Tianlan was the marshal of Zhongzhou state at this time. When the devil troop attacked this manor, Li Tianlan could die. Because there was no evidence that the devil troop belonged to the Wang family of Beihai. But now Wang Tianzong was here, and Li Tianlan must not die. In a sense, from the moment Wang Tianzong entered this manor, Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi were really safe. Passing through the battlefield and the ruins, Wang Tianzong seemed to be moving forward step by step, but in fact, he was constantly retreating. You won. The mountain-like killing intent and sword energy surged around Wang Tianzong for a moment. He became quiet again. We didn't win, and you didn't lose. Qin Weibai shook her head. Maybe the ending was doomed from the beginning. Wang Tianzong didn't speak. He looked at Li Tianlan, who was lying on the bed with a pale face, with some regret in his eyes. There were many kinds of regrets. And all the regrets seemed to gather in Wang Tianzong's eyes at this time. He raised his hand and put it down again. He was silent for a long time. Qin Weibai, who had been standing in silence, watched him become quieter and quieter, and finally said, See the guests out. Two elites of Samsara Palace came over and bowed slightly in silence and respect. Wang Tianzong shook his head and turned to leave. His figure paused at the door and suddenly said, I will get what I want. You have got it. Qin Weibai said calmly. And we have got what we want. The new era? From now on. Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and nodded. In the final sword move, both sides paid a heavy price. No one lost, no one won. In many cases, this was the world. What could they do even if they were unwilling? He walked out of the villa. Under the extremely clear night with the fragrance of flowers and plants, the unconscious Li Kuangtu and Li Shi were carried back. Lin Fengting was also lying on the stretcher. His eyes were open, and he was still awake. Wang Tianzong looked calm, and didn't even look at Li Kuangtu. He walked to Lin Fengting and suddenly asked, How is it? I won't die. Lin Fengting's tone was quiet, and his smile was still free and easy. Wang Tianzong looked at his eyes and said softly with emotion, I can't go back. Lin Fengting nodded and said, Yes. From now on. He looked at Lin Fengting and said softly, It's better to be a stranger. If I can't, I won't. Lin Fengting took over his words, and his voice was extremely decisive. Wang Tianzong smiled. It was better to be a stranger. His figure walked out of the manor and said quietly, It's best. The two brushed past each other, and went in the opposite direction. In the villa, Qin Weibai came out to greet him. She bowed to Lin Fengting and said softly, Thank you, sir. Lin Fengting took a deep look at her and shook his head. In the silent and quiet villa, Li Tianlan was still lying with his eyes closed. Lin Fengting struggled to get up from the stretcher, walked to Li Tianlan, and looked at him for a long time. When he really wakes up, what will happen? Lin Fengting suddenly asked. I don't know. Qin Weibai shook her head, and her eyes became complicated and a little uneasy. The real doomsday is nothing more than that. Lin Fengting muttered to himself. The doomsday? Qin Weibai was a little confused. His, yours, and maybe everyone's. The real doomsday, Lin Fengting said softly, and his eyes gradually became a little blank. Mount Dibbing. The sun was shining brightly. In the extremely quiet palace, Summer Solstice quietly watched everything happening on the screen. In the Beihai Core in Eastern Europe, countless signals locked on Wang Tianzong and Mormons. Summer Solstice did not see the sword tear the sky, but she completely saw the sword shatter the whole city. Infinite brilliant light lingered on the screen, and eventually disappeared. She saw Wang Tianzong, who was almost unscathed, appear in the city of Mormons. She saw Wang Tianzong kill Tyrant with a wave of his hand and take back the indefinite grace. She saw Wang Tianzong's figure moving forward, getting farther and farther away. In the quiet hall, Summer Solstice stood quietly like a statue. After an unknown period of time, her somewhat numb body slowly moved. The picture on the screen had been fixed. It was fixed on the screen without the Sword Emperor. Summer Solstice slowly turned around. Her expression was only calm, without any fluctuation. She opened the door of the palace, and the bright sun shone down. Summer Solstice raised her head and looked straight at the scorching sun in the sky. In the dazzling light, her eyes were red, and she did not know when she had burst into tears. Sparkling tears rolled down her cheeks. Summer Solstice walked out of the palace and into the depths of Mount Dibbing. Along the way, countless guards bowed at the same time when they saw her. Summer Solstice was in a trance. She passed by the World Palace. She boarded the stage of Formidable Person. The dense steps went all the way up and seemed to extend to the end of the sky and the sea. Summer Solstice took out her mobile phone and dialed a number. "Madam." On the phone, a respectful voice sounded. "Prepare a special plane." Summer Solstice's voice was soft and ethereal. "Okay." On the other side of the phone, the respectful voice answered. "Madam, where are you going?" Summer Solstice held the phone and looked to the north. "To Snow Country." She looked to the north, and an imperceptible sharpness was slowly gathering in her eyes. The woman who had amazed an era, and might even become a female chosen one, stood in front of the steps near the top of the stage of Formidable Person. She reached out her hand. The sword intent spread. Crack. The thick stone steps suddenly collapsed. The clear sound of the sword resounded throughout Mount Dibbing. The quaint long sword flew out of the stone steps and fell into Summer Solstice's white palm. Summer Solstice lowered her head and looked at the long sword in her hand. Her eyes were full of affection. More than 20 years ago, it was this sword that opened a path for the Wang family of Beihai in a difficult situation. In the case of treason more than 20 years ago, it was this sword that directly smashed the murderous weapon of the Li family, Infinite Sky. More than 20 years ago, in the past countless years, the Wang family of Beihai had a legend about this sword. But in this era, this was Summer Solstice's sword. The famous sword of Beihai. Autumn Water. Summer Solstice held the sword body of Autumn Water and turned to leave. Summer Solstice's personal maid knelt in front of the first step of the stage of Formidable Person. She held a mobile phone in her hand. "Madam," the maid whispered. "It's a call from His Majesty." Summer Solstice was stunned. She held the sword in one hand and took the mobile phone in the other. The moment she took the mobile phone, she hung up. A text message was sent quickly. "Stay at home and wait for me." Summer Solstice lowered her head and looked at the screen, looking at the typo on the screen. Autumn Water trembled slightly. She was silent, and her eyes turned red again. Chapter 606. The city in the distance gradually fell silent in the darkness. The cold wind howled in the north of Snow Country, and the waves on the seaside were surging. On the road not far from the seaside, the first batch of Snow Country soldiers who had withdrawn from Mormons had gradually gone away. The noise on the coastline in the wilderness disappeared, and everything became quiet again in the night. The usual silence did not last long before it was completely broken. A very clear shadow appeared on the sea level in the distance. The shadow rode the wind and waves in the ocean and approached quickly. The loud roar kept getting clearer. In the vague darkness, one after another behemoth rushed from the deep sea to the shoal. The bright and dazzling searchlights covered the whole coast. In the blazing white light, the star flag of Zhongzhou State was fluttering in the wind, which was extremely cold. One after another, the latest landing ships of Zhongzhou State rushed directly to the beach. The drones took off from the deck of the landing ships and flew into the night sky. In the noise, a large number of elite soldiers of Zhongzhou State rushed up with supplies. The chaotic and orderly crowd continued to extend on the beach, and more people appeared. A simple base had taken shape in the shortest time. A middle-aged man in a major general's military uniform looked around in the crowd with a serious expression. From the moment they landed until now, it had been quiet all around. The entire Snow Country seemed to have no reaction to their arrival. The Major General frowned. His figure suddenly stood somewhere on the beach and muttered to himself. It's a little abnormal. General, most of the military forces of Snow Country are involved in Mormons. After Jia Delin's death, the military of Snow Country is even more chaotic. Even if they can find us, they should not be able to react in a short time. A colonel said calmly. The Major General nodded and looked as usual, but the muscles at the corners of his eyes were twitching slightly. In this case, report the local situation to General Nand immediately. Go north to support Mormons, or go south to join Marshal Dongcheng, and ask him to make a decision early. The colonel froze for a moment and looked at the Major General with a strange look in his eyes. The Major General waved his hand impatiently, and his body became more and more stiff. Go. He pointed to another officer. You go together. The two officers looked at each other for a moment, then turned around and walked toward the landing ship that was about to board. The Major General stood there quietly until the two subordinates walked away. Then he quietly lowered his head and looked at the beach under his feet. The waves rose and fell, the tides rose and fell. Under the night sky, the beach was suffused with a kind of deep darkness. In his line of sight, all the fine grains of sand seemed to be trembling slightly with a subtle and exquisite power. It looked light, but it carried a sharpness that far exceeded the limits of the Major General's imagination. The Major General narrowed his eyes and observed his surroundings. He silently took a step back. A black cloth appeared in front of him. A subtle flow of air surged around his body, and soon, the silhouette of a human figure appeared on the beach beneath his feet. The Major General buried the black cloth well, squatted down quietly, and reached out to flatten the sand. A pale face emerged from the mud. His eyes were tightly shut, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Amidst the bustling voices around him, the Major General's expression became extremely complicated. The moment he boarded the landing ship, he sensed a subtle but extremely sharp sword chi. This extremely sharp sword energy covered the whole beach, and countless grains of sand rose and fell gently under this killing intent. Although the rank of the Major General was not high among the higher-ups, his strength at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm was definitely not weak. He came here by following the sword energy scattered on the beach. Even he did not expect that he would step on a corner of the black robe. To be precise, it was a palm. The palm of the owner of the face in front of him. The Major General looked at him with a complicated expression. The aura of the unconscious figure was extremely weak, and his vitality was almost constantly flowing from his body. But his vitality was so strong that he had been in this state for a long time, but he had never died. The Major General opened his mouth and muttered to himself, "You're really lucky." He didn't know why the other party was in a coma here or even submerged in sand, nor did he know what he had experienced. But these were not important. What was important was that what he saw in front of him was absolutely a great contribution to him. What he needed to do was very simple. It was so simple that he only needed to move his hands and turn the person in front of him into a real corpse. And then he could rise to the top in one step. It was just killing a person. He had done it too many times. How hard was it? The Major General's fingers touched his waist little by little. He held the special military bayonet of Zhongzhou State tightly in his hand. He was short of breath, and his eyes were red with excitement. It was like facing a pie that fell from the sky. They logged in here. The so-called senior officer was the first to log in and inspect the surrounding environment. Then he saw the other party submerged in the sand. What a coincidence! The other party's body was still under the sand. At this moment, no one could see his face except from this angle. He only needed to pierce the other party's heart through this layer of sand with the general bayonet. What was waiting for him would be endless glory, splendor, and wealth. The military bayonet in his hand fell down. A pistol that had obviously been specially modified and overly strengthened was pressed against the back of his head. "What are you doing?" A cold and hard voice sounded behind him. It was not an inquiry but an interrogation. The Major General's body suddenly became stiff. His body turned around bit by bit, and in a short period of time, his mind had already become a blank. "General Nan." "No. Commander Nan. I'm asking you." The pistol was pressed against the back of his head. and the hard voice was filled with killing intent. What are you doing? I found a wounded person of unknown origin. His identity is very suspicious, So you sent away your 2 subordinates to observe alone? You don't know him? Commander Nan's voice became colder and colder. The Major General broke out in a cold sweat. His face never turned around, but his eyes had become calm. Yes, I haven't seen him and… Bang! A loud roar like a cannon suddenly sounded in Commander Nan's hand. The loud sound rolled across the whole beach with a sound wave. The Major General's head and even his upper body were completely blown up. Blood and minced meat splashed out under the night sky, with extreme blood and violence. The soldiers who were busy carrying military supplies from the landing ship were stunned. Not only the soldiers, but even several middle-level and high-level officers around Commander Nan were stunned in place. General Nan. No, Commander Nan, what do you mean? A senior colonel looked at the Major General whose upper body was blown up dully, and his face turned red. Major General Chen Haiyang, the commander of the 9th Fleet of the Beihai Corps. At this moment, nearly half of the people who landed on this beach were elites of the 9th Fleet of the Beihai Corps. No one could have thought that their commander would be shot in the head as soon as the fleet landed. How could this be a headshot? It was simply a dismembered corpse. Isn't the meaning very clear? Commander Nan turned his head and looked at him expressionlessly. What don't you understand? In the darkness, the tall man's face was hard and cold, and his eyes were shining like a wild lion's. Covered in blood, he played with the pistol in his hand, looking more and more dangerous. The senior colonel who questioned him turned redder and redder, but he really didn't dare to say anything for a while. His eyes fell on the pistol in Commander Nan's hand, and the fear deep in his eyes became more and more obvious. In a sense, this pistol was as famous as Commander Nan himself in Zhongzhou State. It could be said to be the only pistol in the dark world whose range exceeded most sniper rifles, reaching almost 5,000 meters. It could even be said to be a hand cannon. The pistol was codenamed Jingzhe. Its superpower and super long range could almost only be controlled by Commander Nan alone. This pistol, which took the Dongqing clan several years to build, was completely deformed because Jingzhe had almost no accurate trajectory. As a pistol, it could only be shot once. Its huge shortcomings and great power were two extremes, just like Commander Nan's character. General Nan, the deputy commander of Zhongzhou State Navy Command, Dongqing Wudi's former personal secretary, was born in the Border Control Corps and had a brilliant resume. His brilliant experience made countless people call him Little God of Massacre. However, in more people's hearts, General Nan was called Crazy Nan. If General Nan hadn't been transferred out of the Border Control Corps for serious violations of military discipline in a border conflict a few years ago, he could even be said to be the best candidate to take over as the commander after Dongqing Wudi left the Border Control Corps. As soon as Dongqing Wudi marched into Snow Country, General Nan mobilized the 5th Fleet of Zhongzhou State stationed in the northeast, and forcibly enlisted the 9th Fleet of the Beihai Corps to march into Snow Country by sea and land. The 9th Fleet did not resist. At this moment, standing on the land of Snow Country, even if General Nan killed the commander of the 9th Fleet, no one in the 9th Fleet dared to resist. The sky was high and the emperor was far away. General Nan was in power. Who was willing to provoke this crazy? General Nan waved his hand. The sand and sand on the ground flew. The figure hidden under the sand and sand completely appeared in front of everyone. That black robe was completely torn, and the exposed skin of the man in black was full of cracks. The wounds had already turned white, and blood was no longer flowing. The injuries that were enough to kill him only made him faint. His aura was becoming weaker and weaker, but his aura could still be considered stable. General Nan looked down at him, then at the senior colonel who looked a little confused and sneered. You entered the thundershocking realm at such an old age. I can imagine how bad your aptitude was when you were young. I'm not surprised that you don't know him. But Chen Haiyang doesn't know him? A few years ago, he respectfully called this man his instructor in Yuzhou. Chen Haiyang said he didn't know him. Do you think I believe it? He waved his hand and said forcefully and domineeringly. Chen Haiyang committed treason and was executed on the spot. This matter can be reported to the army headquarters now. If the Beihai Corps has any different opinions, Let your commander come to me in person. In the silence, Commander Nan's tone became furious. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and carry His Highness onto the ship. Treat him immediately, at any cost. Looking at the so-called Highness who was washed here from an unknown sea area, several officers behind General Nan instantly came to their senses. They carefully lifted his body and ran to the landing ship not far away. General Nan stood where he was and glanced coldly at the body on the ground. He casually kicked his lower body away, took out his mobile phone, and dialed a number. The phone was quickly connected. General Nan, who was domineering a minute ago, had become extremely respectful. His voice was still strong. General, I have landed outside Olin City. Give me a day, no 15 hours, and we will meet in Kamas. You. On the phone, Dongqing Wudi's voice seemed to be smiling bitterly. General, you shouldn't have come. General Nan froze for a moment, and didn't know what to say. It was Dongqing Wudi's order for him to come here. General Nan touched his head. Has the situation changed? Nothing. Dongqing Wudi whispered. It's our concern that makes us confused. In fact, I shouldn't have come. His voice seemed a little embarrassed and annoyed. Since we are here, Snow Country has no choice. Chapter 607. The sky gradually brightened. The first ray of sunlight shone on the Snow Kingdom's palace. The palace warriors, who had been tense all night, subconsciously relaxed. Tension and fatigue spread to every corner of the palace, and every palace warrior's face was filled with sleepiness that could not be concealed. The palace warriors began to change shifts. In the strict and hurried handover between the two sides, the tense atmosphere was maintained. The tense atmosphere in the palace spread, and the capital of the Snow Kingdom, which used to be extremely prosperous, looked unusually quiet at this time. A serious and cold atmosphere permeated every corner of the city. Under the morning sun, Kamas looked like he was ready to welcome the end of the world at any time. The end of the world never came, but the prelude had already begun. The central hall in the depths of the palace had been temporarily converted into a simple morning hall. Bathed in the morning sun, the body of the Snow Kingdom's President Jia Delin was escorted back to Kamas by several middle-level officers, and entered the Snow Kingdom's palace. At this time, all the high-level officials of the Snow Kingdom in Kamas had arrived. The Prime Minister of the Snow Kingdom, Margarero, dressed in a black formal suit, stood at the forefront, looking at the body covered by the flag of the Snow Kingdom, in a daze. The best forensic doctor in the Snow Kingdom had already carefully observed Jia Delin's body in the shortest time possible. At this time he stood beside the Prime Minister and reported in a low voice. The cause of death is unknown. The president's body seemed to have suffered an extremely serious freeze at the moment of death. Preliminary observation shows that the low temperature completely sealed all the pores on the president's body in an instant, but his internal organs showed signs of burning. It was very strange, as if someone had ignited a raging fire in his body while freezing the president. The extreme cold and extreme heat worked at the same time, and directly took away the president's life. The forensic doctor said carefully, his voice full of confusion. He had never seen such a bizarre death. Two extreme temperatures acted on a person's body at the same time. This was like the strongest poison in the world, and almost no one could withstand the torture at that moment. You've worked hard. Margarero nodded, his eyes filled with sadness from the bottom of his heart. The relationship between Jia Delin and Margarero was not harmonious. Jia Delin, who was born in the wealthy Violet family, often thought about the rise of the entire Snow Empire, while Margarero, who was born as a commoner, thought about the overall economy of the Snow Empire. Therefore, most of the time, he was more like the spokesperson of the wealthy families of the Snow Empire. But at this moment, with Jia Delin's strange death, all the grudges had been put down. The strong man who stood at the commanding heights of the regime suddenly collapsed. The sky above the Snow Country seemed to have lost a solid barrier all of a sudden. Wind and rain mixed with fierce momentum whistled over at the same time. Even Margarero could not adapt to such a change in a short period of time. Until the next election, he would bear the pressure of the president as the prime minister. How could it be so easy to take the power of the president during a time of war? Margarero thought for a whole night, but he still could not figure out the future path of Snow Country. You are the best forensic doctor in Snow Country. The Prime Minister looked at the forensic doctor, who was no longer young, and said calmly, I believe in your professional abilities. We must find out the cause of President Jia Delin's death as soon as possible. This is a political mission, understand? The forensic doctor nodded with a determined expression. The Prime Minister looked at him for a long time, and then sighed softly. The war broke out too suddenly. Snow Country started the war with absolute superiority, but no one had expected such an ending. As the president, Jia Delin died inexplicably on the way to Reki City. Until now, the reason had not been found out. Now everyone in Snow Country was angry, and Dongqing Wudi's army was still ready to move. All of this made Snow Country's momentum continue to decline. The decision to completely abandon Mormons was personally issued by Margarero. At least in his eyes, with Jia Delin's death, whether Snow Country could survive was a problem, not to mention winning the war. What Snow Country needed most now was to recuperate. The corner of Margarero's mouth moved. Before he could speak, a military staff officer had rushed into the hall. He lowered his voice and said something quickly in Margarero's ear. Margarero's face kept changing. After a long time, he took a deep breath and seemed to have made up his mind. Everyone. He calmly glanced at all the high-level officials in the hall. I just received the news that Dongqing Wudi's Black Dragon army set off 2 hours ago, and 15 minutes ago Oris fell. Boom. The atmosphere in the whole hall almost completely exploded in an instant. The news that Dongqing Wudi had stopped to rest a few hundred miles away from Kamas had made them a little relaxed. But when the news came, everyone realized that Dongqing Wudi really had no scruples, and was determined to attack Kamas. Oris City was less than 100 kilometers away from Kamas. In other words, maybe in a few hours the Black Dragon Army's vanguard would reach Kamas. Destruction was close at hand, and no one could remain calm. There's another news. Margarero said blandly. The military has confirmed many times that 2 fleets of the Zhongzhou State Navy have landed in Orinda City, with about 30,000 people. That's the only way to retreat from Mormons. At this moment, the 30,000 elites of these 2 fleets have defeated about 60,000 of our retreating troops. And the other side still has no intention of giving up the fight. The other side is led by General Nan of Zhongzhou State. In other words, we can't count on the reinforcements that we hope to withdraw from Mormons to support Kamas. There was a lot of discussion. In the extremely noisy environment, the faces of the high-level officials of Snow Country finally showed unconcealable panic. Mr. Prime Minister, what do you suggest? You can say it now. In the chaotic discussion, an old marshal of Snow Country who had retired stood up and looked into Margarero's eyes. Suggestion? We can't resist. What else can I suggest? Everyone can guess what will happen to Snow Country in the future. Maybe it will be miserable, but this is the only way. No matter how miserable it is, it's much better than Snow Country not existing, isn't it? Margarero smiled bitterly. The old marshal didn't speak, just looked at him quietly. Very good. Margarero shrugged and said, since no one wants to say it, I'll say it. Everyone, the only way to survive so far is to sue for peace, just like. He turned on the screen in the hall. The Eastern European news was showing the carnival in Reki City. Prime Minister Riker of Wulon State was giving a speech. Margarero looked at Riker on the screen with indifferent eyes. Just like Prime Minister Riker? The old marshal took the initiative to speak. No. Margarero shook his head. He stared at Riker on the screen, as if he could clearly see the fear and despair in the depths of his heart. I'll sue for peace, but I won't be like him. Margarero laughed. But Dongqing Wudi's conditions must be very harsh. The old marshal frowned. Yes. Margarero nodded and said in a cold voice, so we don't need to talk to Dongqing Wudi. At this stage we have a better choice. He was silent for a moment and said, I've sent someone to Mormons. The atmosphere in the whole hall froze for a moment. The old marshal's face changed slightly, and he said in a dry voice, Wang Tianzong? We're going to the Wang family of Beihai? Judging from his performance tonight, He and his Wang family of Beihai are qualified to cover snow country under his sharpness. Margarero's tone was calm. The old marshal was silent for a long time and finally did not speak. The high-level officials of snow country did not speak either. Margarero looked in the direction of Mormons with calm eyes. The Wang family of Beihai would never refuse snow country's surrender. They belonged to Zhongzhou state. But in many cases, they were completely different from Zhongzhou state. For snow country, this was the best choice. For the Wang family of Beihai, they had the entire snow country, and would also occupy a great initiative in Eastern Europe. Perhaps their strength would not be stronger than Li Tianlan in an instant, but in the future of Eastern Europe, the Wang family of Beihai with snow country would also have great influence. In a sense, between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai, whoever could absorb their own territory faster could become the future king of Eastern Europe. Margarero was in a daze. He had begun to think about the difficult steps to survive under the wings of the king. When he left the manor and returned to Mormons, Wang Tianzong's aura had calmed down. The extremely powerful sharpness between heaven and earth was everywhere. His arms, which were hidden in the wide sleeves of his robe, were trembling slightly. The voices of surrender continued around him. Those who did not choose to kneel also stayed where they were. They seemed to have lost all hope, and did not even want to think about retreating. Wang Tianzong watched all this quietly. The elites of the Beihai Corps gathered in his sight and walked over. All he could feel in their eyes was almost fanatical worship. Wang Tianzong suddenly felt very tired. He raised his arm reluctantly and whispered, "Gather we." The roaring sound of the rotors interrupted his words. A helicopter of the latest model of snow country rushed directly into the battlefield. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes and looked at the helicopter in the air. His eyes were playful and he was silent. The helicopter barely chose a relatively flat area to land. The hatch opened. A general of snow country rushed down against the strong airflow of the helicopter's rotors, and came to Wang Tianzong. "Your Majesty." The general of snow country stopped less than 5 meters away from Wang Tianzong and bowed deeply. "What's the matter?" Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows. "The Prime Minister has something very important to discuss with you. If your Majesty has time, can you?" "I don't have time." Wang Tianzong interrupted the general of snow country and said calmly, "I don't want to see your Prime Minister either. If Margarero really has something important, let him come to see me." He walked past the general and went to the Beihai Corps. The general seemed a little surprised. He hesitated and said, "Your Majesty, the Prime Minister is very sincere." "Then let him come to see me." Wang Tianzong nodded and kept walking. "Where are you going?" The general smiled bitterly. Wang Tianzong paused and said calmly, "I want to go home. I'm not in the right state these days. I'm seriously stuck and the keyboard has a problem. It's hard to type. The new keyboard will arrive tomorrow. I'll adjust it and try to break out next month." Chapter 608. When everything in the chaos finally calmed down, the last ending also came to an end in a low valley not far from Mormons. A small team walked through the wilderness under the night sky, carefully searching for something. The instruments in their hands had completely lost their effectiveness, but their movements did not seem lost. A wheelchair floated in the biting cold wind. The wheelchair floated in the air, and inside it sat a thin middle-aged man. The man was afraid of the cold, and his body was wrapped in thick cotton clothes. Most of the time he did not speak. His deathly still eyes clearly could not see anything, but the entire team followed the direction he pointed. Southwest. The blind man in the wheelchair coughed violently for a while and raised his hand with difficulty. Another 500 meters. The silent team turned around at almost the same time. As the wheelchair floated in the air, the man in the wheelchair coughed even more violently. "Lin Su, how are you?" A white-haired old man under the wheelchair looked up at the wheelchair in the air with an anxious look in his eyes. He had been keeping the wheelchair afloat, so he could clearly sense Lin Su's physical condition. "I'm fine." Lin Su shook his head and laughed in a hoarse voice. "Second uncle, go higher." The old man's arm moved slightly. Lin Su's voice rang out again. "A little higher." The old man gritted his teeth and controlled the wheelchair to continue rising. Lin Su closed his eyes and sensed for a while, then said softly, "Turn left 300 meters away." Now that he had a precise location, the old man relaxed a little. He immediately lowered the height of his wheelchair. The wheelchair landed on the ground. Lin Su was sitting in it. His face was red, but his whole body was cold. "Why do you and Fengting value this woman so much?" The old man frowned as he looked at his nephew, who clearly did not have much time left. His tone was complicated. "It's not that I value him." Lin Su panted heavily, and his voice became more and more labored. "It's karma. I can see the karma on her. In the next hundreds of years, this will be the key to the Lin clan's continued prosperity. Big Brother believes in my karma, so the Lin clan appeared in Mormons. Are you sure the cause and effect you speak of is with the woman you're looking for?" The old man looked at the Lin clan, and there was a different emotion in his tone. "I remember that the cause and effect you mentioned was Qin Wei Bai. And Qin Wei Bai is in Mormons. That's what I find the most strange." Lin Su shook his head. As the metaphysics grandmaster of this generation of the Lin clan, he was not as famous as Xian Xuanzi and Great Master Wu Wei in Zhongzhou State, but in the hearts of the people inside the Lin clan, he was equally unfathomable. However, at this moment, his thin face showed an unconcealable confusion. "What I saw at first was karma, and Qin Wei Bai was part of it. But I can't see through the master of Samsara Palace. Her fate is related to the general trend, but her karma is not in the general trend." The old man frowned. He had a confused look on his face. He was the uncle of Lin Su and Lin Fengting. He left the headquarters of the Lin clan more than 20 years ago, and had not been heard from for many years. If it were not for the changes of the Lin clan in Mormons and the change of the patriarch, it was estimated that he would not return to the Lin clan in this life. With the changes of the Lin clan, more and more old people who had left the Lin clan for many years were returning. At this time, listening to the so-called general trend and cause and effect that his nephew said, he instinctively felt that there was something he did not like. The old man shook his head and muttered to himself, "It's good to avoid the world. It's relaxing. Many old guys in the clan think so. How difficult it is to really stand aloof from the world. The Lin clan can do it now because it has the strength now. But nothing will always change. The one in Beihai is already supreme. If the Lin clan doesn't move, how can there be real freedom in the future? Second uncle, you may not like the chaos in the clan now, but all this is for the stability of the Lin clan in the future." Blood gushed out of Lin Su's mouth. He wiped it casually, and his eyes were a little fanatical. "I can see the cause and effect, but I can't see through it. But it doesn't matter. It's good to find her tonight. 150 meters to the right." The team continued to move forward. The old man sighed and patted Lin Su on the shoulder. "Take care of yourself. It's just a life. Every minute I live is worth it. Don't worry about it. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." Lin Su smiled, and a strange light flashed in his dead eyes. "Our current direction may be the direction of the Lin clan in the future. I'm not as optimistic as you are. You saw that sword. How good can the result of the person who made that sword be? Wang Tianzong." The old man shook his head and suddenly said, "How is Wang Tianzong's current state after that sword? I don't know martial arts. How do I know what will happen?" Lin Su shook his head with a smile and said calmly, "But no matter what, people have to fight for their own lives." Fight for their own lives. The old man narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. After a long search, the team finally stopped. Lin Su, who had calmed down a little, became excited again. He pushed the wheelchair forward quickly. The lush vegetation in front of him was completely crushed. In his sight, a slender woman in black curled up on the ground, trembling slightly. The armor on her body had been completely broken. Her body was no longer bloated. At this moment, she curled up on the ground, looking extremely delicate and delicate. Lin Su pushed the wheelchair closer to her. The woman seemed to notice something. Her body barely stabilized, and a voice sounded in Lin Su's ear, which was very faint. Lin Su struggled hard, fell off the wheelchair, and approached the woman. At this moment he finally heard the woman's voice, which was almost a whisper. It hurts, she said in a trembling voice, but tears poured out of her eyes as if they were out of control. Her willpower struggled in the trance and eternal darkness. She remembered the sword that pierced his heart in the snow that year. He said it really hurt. It turned out to be really painful. It really hurt. Lin Su looked at her quietly, with a somewhat complicated expression. Her body curled up hard, as if trying to protect herself, but the vitality in her body was flowing away crazily like a broken dam. The sword light had passed, but the willpower that entered the transcendent realm had completely entered time and space. Lin Su was very close to her. He looked at the man's body curled up, half of his face buried in the soil, and the half of his face that was revealed after the man's mask was broken, revealing the side of his face that was incomparably exquisite and perfect. The uncontrollable willpower kept surging. With memories that seemed to be from a lifetime ago, Lin Su saw countless pictures, gratitude and resentment, love and hatred, magnificent and sentimental. In the other party's memory, he finally understood something. Lin Su smiled. His smile was a little dim, but it looked extremely peaceful. He quietly looked at the master of Samsara Palace, whose vitality was constantly flowing away, and whispered, "It turns out that you are the real cause and effect." For the Lin clan, Qin Weibai was cause and effect, so was Li Tianlan. But all causes and effects were related to the general trend. Qin Weibai, Li Tianlan, the Lin clan, the Wang family of Beihai. Everyone had cause and effect with this world. But the master of Samsara Palace did not. She had nothing to do with the whole world or anyone. From the beginning to the end, all her cause and effect was with Li Tianlan. It's all fake. He looked at the master of Samsara Palace and murmured to himself. The master of Samsara Palace could no longer respond. Her body no longer trembled, and the last vitality dissipated in her body. Endless coldness and darkness enveloped her, and her body became stiff. Lin Su seemed to see the real choice. He sat where he was and kept silent for a long time. The pictures that were transmitted directly into his mind by the will of the transcendent realm disappeared. Everything, including vitality, was finally over. It was completely over. The old man, who could be said to be the highest in the Lin clan according to seniority, walked over slowly and said in a low voice, "Go back, she has passed away." At this moment, the old man thought of the sword that tore heaven and earth apart not long ago, and the last words of the master of Samsara Palace. You are all non-entities." The old man never thought that he would see such a proud person finish the last journey of her life, and finally die in front of him. He patted Lin Su on the shoulder and wanted to pull him up. Lin Su didn't move. Gaze. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Looking at the lifeless master of Samsara Palace on the ground, he shook his head gently and sighed in a low voice. You won the sword, but you lost. The old man behind him frowned. Lin Su suddenly smiled and said softly, "Second uncle, you haven't come back in these years, so there are some things you don't know about my body." His face turned pale for a moment, and he said slowly, "In fact, it wasn't very good 3 years ago. At that time, my brother found Wang Tianzong for me, and wanted to trade in immortality with the Wang family of Beihai to prolong my life. That time when he went out, he met Li Tianlan and the master of Samsara Palace." The old man raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "Did Wang Tianzong refuse?" "No." Lin Su shook his head. "But the conditions were too harsh. Sword Emperor hoped that my brother could help him do 3 things. The old man fell silent. Even in the era of heavenly sons, experts at the peak of the invincible realm were the real big shots. Doing 3 things and agreeing to 3 things were 2 completely different concepts. If Lin Fengting had agreed at that time, what the Wang family of Beihai would get in the future would be much more precious than that immortality. My brother wanted to agree at that time, but I refused. My situation actually had little to do with vitality. Even if I got immortality, I would at most linger on for a few more years, which was meaningless. The most important thing was that I knew that I couldn't do anything in the last few years, so I might as well not do it. Then that immortality fell into the hands of Li Tianlan, who needed it very much at that time." Lin Su's voice gradually became calm. The old man frowned and thought for a moment. Is this the cause and effect you mentioned? It's part of it. When I refused immortality, I didn't see what happened today. I just thought that if I refused, it would be better for the Lin clan. Using immortality for my poor life is a real waste of God's gift. The old man's eyes became deep. At this time, he didn't know why Lin Su suddenly talked about the Wang family of Beihai and immortality. I'm not saying this to regret anything, but now I'm sure of the fact that I saw 3 years ago again. Second uncle, I'm a useless person. If I stay in the Lin clan, I really can't play any role. He reached out and held the palm of the master of Samsara Palace, which had become a little cold. But she can, you. The old man's face changed dramatically. He wanted to stop him, but it was too late. An incomparably strong warm wave instantly filled the silent and cold world under the curtain of the night. Starlight shone down from the sky, and the world under the night sky was burning and heating up, with unimaginable mystery and luck. Lin Su's face grew calmer, but his eyes began to burn. Stop. The old man's face changed dramatically, and his voice was high and anxious. In any case, he never thought that they would end up like this after finding the master of Samsara Palace. Lin Su might not have thought of it either, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he made the right decision at the most appropriate time. Lin Su laughed. His skinny face seemed to gradually fill up. In an instant, he had an indescribable elegance about him. His deathly still eyes gradually became lax. Second uncle, guess what I saw? The old man stared at Lin Su's face. His body trembled slightly. I saw it. Lin Su sighed in a low voice. I saw it was worth it. He held the master of Samsara Palace's palm hard. I'm a flash of fire. The strong warm tide surged and gathered. That was the temperature that could burn the world. The high temperature with a faint vitality completely surrounded the body of the master of Samsara Palace. Lin Su smiled softly, and his body gradually disappeared. Maybe he would be unwilling, maybe he would feel regret, but the moment he got close to the master of Samsara Palace, he really saw all the cause and effect, and he also saw it was worth it. His remaining life turned into a residual flame, with the last heat, and instantly reignited the slight vitality of the master of Samsara Palace. There seemed to be an invisible fire burning in the void. The flame swallowed Lin Su's body, and his last voice sounded. Everyone has to fight for his own life. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 609. Before the morning light came, the night had passed. The sky before dawn was dark and solemn, as if bathed in the darkness of the whole world. He slowly walked to the shore from the sea and looked at the mountain that he had been thinking about day and night, which was now close at hand. The dim lights flickered on the mountain. It seemed to be far away, but it also seemed to be very close. He stood on the shore and watched quietly. After a long time, he gently stepped up to the shining mountain in front of him. The flowers and the moon were silent. The rich fragrance of flowers drifted from the other side of the mountain, filling the whole area with the sea breeze. The fragrance was pleasant. He walked in the floating fragrance and deeply sniffed the smell of the grass and trees around him. His eyes were all calm. The mountain was heavily guarded. He walked to the end of the 3-kilometer-long side road, and finally reached the foot of the mountain. The military base that guarded the whole mountain operated day and night. The dazzling lights flickered with the smell of iron and blood, completely illuminating the whole foot of the mountain. He didn't hide his figure, and slowly walked over. In an instant, countless dazzling lights shone on him. He stood there, looking straight at the endless lights, without saying a word. The whole base was boiling after a short silence. Countless soldiers rushed out and knelt in front of him. The lights disappeared. The voice that shook the whole mountain rolled through the sky. Your Majesty! Get up! He silently looked at the crowd in front of him. After a long time he waved his hand and said, You did a good job. He walked forward and casually patted the shoulder of a nearby soldier. Well done. He walked through the crowd unhurriedly and occasionally patted the shoulders or arms of the soldiers around him. This might be the first time for many soldiers of the Beihai Corps to have a close contact with their sword emperor. Countless people stared at his back with fanatical eyes, as if they were worshipping God. He walked through the crowd and looked back at the army that guarded Mount Dibbing day and night. After a moment of silence, he whispered, "Thank you for your hard work." Boom. Amidst the uniform sound, countless soldiers seemed to want to kneel down again. He raised his hand. An extremely surging force suddenly gushed out from the incomparably calm heaven and earth. A huge force acted on everyone's body, causing everyone to stand on the spot. He shook his head and said lightly, "Beihai doesn't have this rule." He slowly turned around and walked along the mountain path to the peak. A hazy whiteness vaguely appeared on the horizon. It was extremely weak, but it dispelled the deepest darkness before dawn. Flowers and plants were in full bloom on Mount Dibbing, and the water was murmuring. Countless subtle sounds were transmitted to his ears, like flowers blooming and withering. He stared deeply at every picture he saw, feeling extremely nostalgic. In his decades of life, this mountain had always been the most beautiful world in his eyes. The morning breeze with the smell of the sea blew over. It was midsummer in Zhongzhou State, but the morning wind was extremely cold. His steady footsteps trembled slightly. He clenched his fists hard, took a deep breath, and continued to move upward. The sweet morning air rushed into his throat. When his feet landed, he could no longer suppress the blood that spurted out of his mouth. He coughed violently, and every cough was accompanied by thick blood and broken internal organs. The wind continued to blow. The golden edges of the black costume shimmered, bright and dignified. His hair was losing its luster at a speed visible to the naked eye. It became dim, then white, and finally turned into a pale white without any vitality. In just a few seconds, with the blood he coughed out, the body that was calm and could almost carry the world had been filled with a sense of decay. He tried to stand up and insist on going up the mountain. But in the cold morning wind, his body moved forward against the wind, and was finally blown to the ground. He had never experienced such weakness in his life. His body rolled for dozens of meters on the mountain road with an obvious slope, and finally grasped a small tree by the road. The blood was still flowing. He shut his mouth tightly and swallowed all the blood. With an incomparably calm gaze, he struggled to stand up and staggered towards a nearby pavilion. The stone chair in the pavilion was still cold in the middle of the night. He sat on the stone chair, leaning against the pillar behind him, and looked at the distant sky blankly. The hazy whiteness was still at the end of the sky. Not far in front of him was a pool of clear water, sparkling and reflecting the moonlight in the sky. He looked at it quietly and finally closed his eyes. Countless pictures flashed in his mind one by one, fast or slow, and they were unforgettable. The moonlight fell on him softly. He smiled softly, but his eyes were already blurred when he opened them. In the scattered and cold moonlight, he sat in the pavilion, looked up at the moon in the sky, and looked back at his past. In the quiet and cool world, he gently hummed a song with deep affection and melancholy. The silver boat swaying, bending, hanging in the fluffy sky. "What's your name?" "Summer. Summer solstice." "Why are you here?" "I have no home. Uncle Wang brought me here." "Oh, my name is Wang Tianzong." "Brother, come with me." "Your worries 3322 Lanlan, stop in my quiet heart." "I like the moon, brother. I like you too. Call my name." "Wang." "Brother Tianzong. Call your name." "Ah, what's your name?" "Oh my God, what are you doing?" "Kwangtu, come and see what they are doing, ha 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 ha." You said, how can a person not be lonely when he is in love, and worried when he is in love? Do you like her? Yes. Tell me after you think it through. I like her. Why? Because I like her very much. My luggage, lonely alone, makes me feel melancholy. Uncle Lee will keep an eye on him. The future of Beihai can't be pinned on this. It'll be fine. I'll solve these things. When it's over, let's go on a trip. Fool, you're the patriarch now. People are banished to the border. It's like walking into the 5th season. The day and night are disorderly and harmonious. The tide rises and falls willfully. There's no spring in the dictionary. Tianzong ahem, he's dead. Li Kuangtu is dead. I'm amazing, right? How is she? Say. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. How is she? Say it. How is she? Your Highness, madam, Are you going to say it or not? Are you going to say it or not? If you don't say it, I'll kill you. It's my incompetence, maybe. Trash. A bunch of trash. Get out, all of you. People squander their tears, avoiding the parting that's still in front of them. I dreamed of you just now. Don't talk. Pay attention to rest. It's okay. Be obedient. I'm here. Oh. Sleep a little longer. It'll be okay. Tianzong, if I'm not by your side, don't be silly. You'll always be by my side. Yeah, ahem. We still have to go on a trip. Yes, tomorrow. Let's go tomorrow, okay? Okay, tomorrow? You don't dare to think about tomorrow. I refuse to say goodbye. It's not worth it. You're more important than 2 portions of medicine. But it's really not worth it. If I say it's worth it, it's worth it. My body is already very poor. It's okay. We still have immortality. If I don't let you go, you can't go. Oh, some people say that every time you say goodbye, there will be a star in the sky, and it will be extinguished. I've entered the invincible realm. That's great. The situation can be stabilized. Yeah, my man is the best. Do you think my newly cultivated flowers look good? You look the best. You're glib. How's your body? Do you feel uncomfortable? Very good. The best. Tianzong, these are the happiest 2 years of my life. When your body is completely stable, we'll go on a trip. Well, I want to go to many places. The silver boat swaying, bending, hanging in the fluffy sky. Your worries 3322 Lanlan stop on my quiet heart. You say, how can a person not be lonely when love is deep? When love is strong, you are worried. My luggage, lonely, alone, scattered, makes me feel melancholy. I'm exiled to the border, as if I've entered the 5th season. The day and night are in disorder and harmony. The tide rises and falls willfully. There's no spring in the dictionary. I'm squandering my tears, avoiding the parting that's still in front of me. You don't dare to understand. I refuse to say goodbye. Someone said that every time you say goodbye, there will be a star in the sky, and then it will go out. His voice gradually lowered until it was silent. A cold and delicate palm came around his shoulder, silently wiping away the blurriness in his eyes. Wang Tianzong held that palm. Even if he was exerting force, his strength was still extremely weak. I'm back, he whispered. Summer Solstice answered and did not move. Wang Tianzong slowly turned his head. In his sight, there was a face full of tears, pear blossoms in the rain, extremely beautiful. Wang Tianzong looked at her in a daze. This was her most beautiful appearance. He had never gotten tired of seeing it all his life. Sorry, he suddenly smiled a little bitterly. I still couldn't kill him. He wiped out most of the elites of the purgatory of Heaven capital in Eastern Europe, wiped out the top experts of the entire dark world, and really hurt deity. But this was not what he wanted. He still couldn't kill him and give Summer Solstice an explanation. It doesn't matter. There will be chances in the future. Summer Solstice wiped her tears and said softly. In fact, there is a chance, but I don't dare to gamble. Wang Tianzong laughed at himself and said, the 13th floor. What the hell is going on? Summer Solstice's voice was a little trembling. 3 days had passed since that night in Eastern Europe. During these 3 days, she had never closed her eyes. Mormon's last sword strike could be said to be eternal, but only Summer Solstice knew what kind of injury Wang Tianzong had suffered in that sword strike. She knew her man very well. As long as there was a little possibility, deity would not be alive. But now deity was not dead, which showed that the situation at that time was very bad. The 13th floor, Summer Solstice said to herself. That sword formation is very complicated. Give me some time to study it, and I can also create a sword formation comparable to the 13th floor. The sword energy of the same origin has different functions. It is to activate and lock. Wang Tianzong recalled carefully, and his white hair swayed slightly in the wind. That can be said to simulate heaven and earth with sword intent. The 13th floor activated that sword strike and locked Mormons at the same time. So that sword strike couldn't be avoided and could only be taken by force. That's all? Summer Solstice looked at Wang Tianzong's white hair in a daze. If that's all, how did you become like this? Wang Tianzong was silent for a while. His tone became a little difficult and helpless. There's also fusion. Sword energy fusion. He smiled bitterly. The sword strike between me and the master of Samsara Palace was just the beginning. That sword strike was really strong and made me use my immortality. But the sword energy of that sword strike didn't dissipate at that time, so… Fusion. Summer Solstice's voice was obviously trembling. Yes. Wang Tianzong nodded. The sword energy of the 13th floor has been integrated with my sword energy. The corners of his mouth twitched and he said slowly, in the past 3 days, all my efforts have been in vain. I can't suppress the sword energy of the 13th floor. The sword energy has taken root in my body. I can still fight, but the more power I use, the more damage the sword energy in my body will cause to me. In a short time, it's hard for me to find a solution. So Li Guangtu can't die and I can't kill him. I can kill Tyrant, and Tyrant is nothing to worry about. If I kill Li Guangtu, Fengting will definitely take action. With the sword intent in my body, if Fengting tries his best, I may not be his opponent. Even if I can win, once Li Guangtu dies, the Li family will take revenge madly, and there will be internal and external troubles in the clan. Ha! He suddenly coughed violently. Countless bloodlines burst on his body, and blood flowed down his clothes. I still lost, Wang Tianzong murmured to himself. I lost. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, he got the benefits he wanted and broke through to become the chosen one. But he didn't win. If he didn't win, he would fail. I've sent someone to prepare what you need to recuperate. Summer Solstice's face was pale and bloodless. Drops of blood on Wang Tianzong's body were cutting his heart like a knife. Tianzong, what's the best result? It's hard to have the best result. Wang Tianzong hesitated. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Maybe I will recover and can still maintain the current realm, but there will be flaws. I can be regarded as the chosen one, but my state is not good. What's the worst result? Summer Solstice grabbed Wang Tianzong's sleeve hard. The worst result, Wang Tianzong smiled. That's death. When he said this, his tone was extremely calm, without any unwillingness or regret. Actually, I thought about it. Wang Tianzong stood up with difficulty and grabbed Summer Solstice's palm. I'd better not come back for the time being. I'll recuperate outside first. He stared at Summer Solstice's face. I still can't help it. I always want to come back and see you. It's okay. Summer Solstice said softly. Her tone was no longer trembling, and she seemed to have completely calmed down. You can recuperate in peace. I'm at home. Shengxiao stays in Eastern Europe to negotiate with Snow Country. Wang Tianzong said softly. Snow Country has little room for resistance. In a few days, there should be clear news. The dark world of Snow Country belongs to the Wang family of Beihai in the future. But the situation is not too good. The only good news is that most of the forces in the dark world are no longer a threat to us. But the news of my recuperation must be kept secret. It must be kept secret. Summer Solstice said yes, extremely soft. Wang Tianzong walked forward with weak steps and whispered, I'm afraid my problem can't be solved in a short time. During my recuperation, all the affairs in the clan will be temporarily handed over to Dijiang to deal with. You should keep an eye on it. Dijiang? Summer Solstice was a little stunned and asked subconsciously, why not Xiaoyao? Let Xiaoyao take charge in Eastern Europe. Wang Tianzong's calm voice was filled with deep coldness. Summer Solstice's face kept changing. When Wang Tianzong's will was silent, there was no problem that the young Wang Shengxiao could not take over the patriarch's position for the time being. But as Wang Tianzong's younger brother, Wang Xiaoyao was sent to Eastern Europe and Dijiang jumped up. There were too many problems in it. Dijiang and Wang Xiaoyao were both top experts of the half-step invincible realm. That was the combat capability of the invincible realm. There was no difference in strength, and they were about to break through to the invincible realm. At this time, letting Wang Xiaoyao go to Eastern Europe and Dijiang stay was almost a clear message to the outside world that Wang Tianzong did not trust Wang Xiaoyao. Xiaoyao he? Summer Solstice asked cautiously. What did he do? Don't think too much. Wang Tianzong whispered. It's okay. He sighed softly. I just feel a little sorry for you. When I was young, I said I would take you on a trip, until now. In the next few years, I'm afraid I won't have time. You know I don't care about these things. Summer Solstice bit her lip hard and whispered. As long as you're good, I'm good, so you must get better, understand? Of course. Wang Tianzong nodded with a smile, and coughed up another mouthful of blood. With the support of the immortality potion, his vitality was still stable, but the sword energy of the 13-story building had been torturing his body and will cruelly, which made him look weaker and weaker. The two did not choose to go to the top of the mountain. Instead, they turned near the top of the mountain, and finally entered the most mysterious number 5 laboratory in Mount Dibbing. The laboratory was located underground. The 2 doors on the ground had been opened. The dark passage with lights spread out, and no one knew how far it was. This was the place where Wang Tianzong was going to recuperate. Wang Tianzong quietly looked at the passage in front of him, and was silent for a long time. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, the whole dark world was withering. Fire flaming realm, thunder shocking realm, half-step invincible realm, peak invincible realm, and even the chosen one, after the absolute chaos and glory, everything would be silent. He would also be silent in this passage. No one knew how long it would take, and no one even knew if he would come out again. Wang Tianzong turned his head and looked at Mount Dibbing in his sight. The dawn gradually brightened. The morning sun rose in the distant deep sea. The sun pierced the clouds, and the sky was gorgeous. A new era. He felt the warm sunshine and murmured to himself. No matter what era it is the era of Beihai. Summer Solstice said softly, and her tone was extremely firm. Wang Tianzong turned his head to look at his wife. He gently leaned over, kissed her on the face, and whispered, "Wait for me." He seemed to be afraid of something. He looked at Summer Solstice's eyes and said seriously, "Wait for me." "I can wait." Summer Solstice smiled. Tears and smiles appeared on her face at the same time. "Just don't be too long. Don't be too long." Wang Tianzong did not speak. He just touched his wife's hair, turned around, and walked into the long and deep passage. Summer Solstice stood where she was and looked at his back quietly. The torrent of time washed from the past to the present. She looked at her beloved husband, and the scenes of the past emerged with all the feelings of the past. There was laughter, happiness, and touching. He was satisfied and content with what he had. Beside him, what Summer Solstice felt most was silence and stability. With him and the Wang family of Beihai, what she felt most was silence and stability. Perhaps the things he had been carrying were too heavy. So Summer Solstice had never seen the slightest complacency and arrogance in him. Life was not complacent. Occasionally, she could only feel cautiousness from him. The strength of Beihai, the hegemony of Beihai, and the sword light of the Sword Emperor swept everything. Everything was built on the foundation of caution. He was like the god of the Wang family of Beihai, sheltering everything and blocking all threats from the outside world. For more than 20 years, whether Beihai had returned to its peak or not, the whole Wang family of Beihai seemed to be having a leisurely and happy dream during this short, but by no means short period of time. The foolish man never said much. He carried countless things on his shoulders. He cried and was tired, silent, and careful. Summer Solstice was also immersed in this kind of dream for a time. But all the beauty was a dream and eventually became a bubble. Wang Tianzong's figure disappeared in the passage. Summer Solstice looked at the figure before he disappeared. He finally bent down. His hair was white and his figure was stooped. Summer Solstice stood there, tears gushing out. She woke up from the dream. In the future, the whole Wang family of Beihai would face the cruelty and truth that had been carried by him alone. Summer Solstice didn't know how long it would take. She didn't even know whether it should be longer or shorter. She didn't dare to think about tomorrow. But he still insisted and refused to say goodbye. The door of the No. 5 laboratory gradually closed. Summer Solstice took a deep breath and straightened her body. The sun leaped into the sky. Summer Solstice raised her head and looked at the sky of the new era. The extreme coldness blew over with the wind. The scorching sun hung high, and the whole world was gloomy. This was the new era. It was a world without light. It was a world without dreams. End of Volume 4. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 6:10. In the dim dream, there seemed to be countless voices thinking in his ears. The scene of the dream seemed to be changing every minute and every second. Fragmented information came in messily, and countless voices were still thinking, which made him upset. Li Tianlan rarely dreamed, but once he did. The content of the dream was often strange. Mountains and seas, fire and ice, saber and sword shadows, and the chaotic dream continued. He dreamed of meeting Qin Weibai for the first time in Huading. He dreamed that Dongqing Rushi took his hand, and said that she had liked him for many years. He dreamed that Wang Yuetong looked at him with tears in her eyes and asked him why. He dreamed that the lonely mountain in Lin, and appeared in the primeval forest where the Li family had been hiding for many years. He even dreamed that countless people wanted to kill him. In a trance, Li Tianlan felt as if he had died again and again. In the heart-wrenching pain, the shadow of the saber and the sword rushed toward him along with the raging fire. The scene changed to the hazy white mist of the manor. He dreamed that Qin Weibai was holding him tightly, the master of Samsara Palace stood beside him, and flaming fire stabbed him in the chest with a saber. In the distance he vaguely heard Li Guangtu's roar. The night wind messed up the light and shadow. Qin Weibai flew up and rose. High in the sky, in the world full of starlight, there was a touch of black and white that tore apart heaven and earth. The sword light was like the sea. Qin Weibai, who flew high in the sky, turned into Dongqing Rushi, Wang Yuetong, and finally into a woman that Li Tianlan did not know. She rushed toward the sword light, like a moth flying into the fire. Li Tianlan suddenly opened his eyes. The sunlight outside was blocked by the curtains. In the slightly dim environment, Li Tianlan sat up and shook his head. The trance in his mind began to disappear, and everything in front of him became real. This was a bedroom that was luxurious enough to make one's jaw drop. It was not the kind of bedroom that was piled up with countless gold and silver. The bedroom was slightly dark and warm, and there were details everywhere in the bedroom. The warm chandelier exuded a soft light, and the light shone on every corner, giving people a very comfortable visual enjoyment. Li Tianlan's eyes calmed down in the fastest time. He looked around and didn't know where he was for a moment. There was also a natural and rich fragrance floating beside the bed. Feeling the familiar smell, Li Tianlan was lost in thought. The pain in his chest was still spreading little by little. The wound didn't look big, but the damage it caused to his body was beyond his expectation. He didn't know how long he had been in a coma, but now he felt the pain in his chest. It would still take time for the scar to heal. He slowly rubbed his forehead. His mind was in a mess. Countless questions popped up in his head, but suddenly he didn't want to know the answers. Light footsteps sounded outside the door. The door was pushed open, and Qin Weibai, who was dressed in plain clothes, walked in with a delicate bowl in her hands. Li Tianlan looked at her, and was stunned. Looking at Li Tianlan, she was also stunned. After a short silence she smiled and said softly, "When did you wake up?" Her smile was clear and indifferent. There was no surprise in it, but it was filled with boundless affection. "I just woke up." Li Tianlan's mind seemed to be a little slow. He slowly moved his body and said, "Where are we?" "Yuzhou." Qin Weibai came over and handed Li Tianlan the small bowl with Chinese medicine in her hand. She whispered, "Drink it while it's hot. It's good for your injury." Li Tianlan subconsciously took it and drank the slightly hot Chinese medicine in one gulp. Qin Weibai took out a candy and put it in Li Tianlan's mouth. She looked at him softly, as if she was coaxing a child. Li Tianlan thought about it with the candy in his mouth. His brain had realized the strangeness of things, but his thinking was still a little slow. "How long have I been in a coma?" 5 days. Qin Weibai handed over a glass of warm water and said, "Compared to us, this chapter is not over. Please turn the page. It's a day earlier than expected." Li Tianlan took a sip of water and muttered to himself, 5 days. Yuzhou, Eastern Europe. He held the glass of water, and his arms trembled slightly. Qin Weibai sat down next to him and reached out to hold his palm. She said in a soft and cautious tone, "Don't think too much, Tianlan. It's over." It's over, oh it's over. Li Tianlan suddenly smiled, a little self-deprecating. The last scene before he woke up was the desperate scene of Wang Tianzonging defeating all the top experts in the dark world. In a coma, it seemed that it was just a dream, and it was over. What's the result? He asked, looking at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai hesitated and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. What's the result? Li Tianlan looked at her eyes, which were shining with charming brilliance. There are many kinds of results, and there are also many kinds of uncertain results, specific to individuals and specific to the general trend. Although things have passed, many things are still very chaotic. The specific results have not come out for the time being. Li Tianlan's heart gradually sank, and his chest ached again. He forced himself to calm down and asked slowly, "Did we lose?" "For the moment, we just didn't win." Qin Weibai held Li Tianlan's hand and said softly, "Tianlan, many things involve too much. In fact, there is no winner or loser. This is the case in Eastern Europe. The essence of this chaos is the future and survival. From the beginning, there is no winner. The current result is in line with expectations. The essence is the future and survival." Li Tianlan looked into her eyes. "My future and survival?" Qin Weibai hesitated. Then she nodded. "Yes." Li Tianlan was speechless for a while. He led the Snowdance Corps into Eastern Europe on behalf of Zhongzhou State. It could be said that he participated in everything. But even as a person who experienced it personally, he could not tell how much the chaos in Eastern Europe involved. All the dark forces were deeply involved in Eastern Europe. The murderous weapons were broken, the invincible realm experts were killed, the divine and holy lists were fragmented, and the entire dark world was almost completely withered. The essence of all this was for his future and survival. If those fallen invincible realm experts knew this so-called essence, what would they feel? Li Tianlan held the cup and thought about Qin Weibai's conclusion. A chaotic situation where there would be no victor. It was a chaotic situation for his survival and future. If all the results were in line with expectations, what would happen to Wang Tianzong? What about the master of Samsara Palace, who really planned the chaos? How is the palace master? Li Tianlan suddenly said, "Take me to see her." Qin Weibai looked at him quietly. There was a different kind of emotion in her deep and bright eyes. It seemed to be sympathy, but also something else. Such a gaze seemed to carry a heavy force, pulling his heart down continuously. Li Tianlan waited for Qin Weibai's answer. Qin Weibai did not answer. She took out her mobile phone and handed it to Li Tianlan. "The password is the date we first met," Qin Weibai said. Qin Weibai said with an unnatural look on her face. Li Tianlan entered a string of numbers without hesitation and unlocked the mobile phone. A video that had been played countless times and spread far appeared in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan subconsciously slowed down his breathing and clicked the play button. The picture was silent. But that almost eternal sword light lit up in the extremely distant night sky. That was the sword that put an end to the whole era. The sword broke the sky, tore the city apart, and shortened the distance on the edge of life and death, with an unprecedented bright sword. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The light burst out completely and became the final ending. Li Tianlan's face gradually turned pale. Through the screen he could not feel the sword intent of this sword. But in the endless surging colorful light, he could roughly imagine the power of this sword, and the price to pay for this sword. An invincible realm expert could not make such a sword. Not even a half-step chosen one. This was the real supreme sword light. It tore the world apart and obliterated everything. This was the last sword move of the master of Samsara Palace in the dark world. She gave up everything without hesitation. When this sword move was made, no matter what Wang Tianzong did, the master of Samsara Palace was bound to die. The so-called bound meant that there would be no accident. Li Tianlan's hand was shaking and could hardly hold the mobile phone. He clicked the screen with his trembling hand several times before pressing the play button again. Over and over again. In the silent picture, the sword light seemed to be the final farewell. Qin Weibai left and then walked in. She held a huge wooden box in her hands and put it beside Li Tianlan. She whispered, "This is for you." Li Tianlan turned his head numbly and opened the wooden box in a daze. The dark giant sword lay in the wooden box. The sun, moon, stars, mountains, lakes, and seas were no longer lustrous. This was Xianyuan Feng, who belonged to him in the future. Li Tianlan stretched out his hand and gently stroked the blade of the sword. He muttered to himself, "You promised to live. You promised." Qin Weibai lowered her head, and her eyes were slightly red. "Is this what she wants? For my survival and future?" Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai, and his voice was a little sad. "This is what she wants most," Qin Weibai whispered. "It can even be said that this is the whole meaning of the existence of the Samsara Palace." Li Tianlan did not speak. He thought of the hug before the blade pierced his chest again. It was so heavy, so gentle, so reluctant. Thousands of words and countless times seemed to be condensed in that hug. At this time, in retrospect, all the emotions at that time were clearly determined. "I'm sorry." A light voice rang in his ears. Li Tianlan closed his eyes and whispered, "Why?" "She said it before. There shouldn't be shadows in your sky." Qin Weibai whispered. Li Tianlan opened his eyes, and his eyes were in a trance. At this moment, he remembered the meeting with military counselor in the East Emperor Palace in Huading more than 3 years ago. It seemed that military counselor wanted to tell him something from that time. He said that what the master of Samsara Palace wanted was a sky without shadows. Until this moment. Only then did Li Tianlan realize that what she wanted was his sky without shadows. The chaos had already passed. Sometimes it was vigorous, sometimes it was silent. He did not see any of them. But those sword lights and shadows that belonged to the Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, and many other forces, which were always hanging over his head and would fall at any time, finally dissipated with the chaos. His future was only bright. The eternal night of Mormons continued. Yuzhou had ushered in a clear sky. Li Tianlan walked to the bed, opened the curtains, and opened the window. The warm and bright sunshine shone on him. In his sight, there was a clear sky. Li Tianlan thought about the hug quietly. Something in his heart seemed to be quietly breaking, and it disappeared completely with the sunshine. His heart was blank. P.S. The first chapter that I haven't seen for a long time. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. That you're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.